Welcome to World of Sleepcraft. Tonight we tell the complete story of the Demon Hunters, the Illidari, warriors who sacrificed their sight and their humanity to become living weapons against the Burning Legion across 10,000 years of war. In the vast darkness between worlds, there exists a realm of chaos and destruction known as the Twisting Nether. It is a place beyond normal reality, a dimension where the rules of physics and magic that govern the material world do not apply. Time flows differently there, or perhaps does not flow at all. Space bends and twists in impossible configurations. It is a realm of madness and nightmare. It is here that demons dwell, creatures of pure malevolence, whose only purpose is the annihilation of all ordered life. They are not merely evil, but the embodiment of evil, beings whose very nature is destruction and corruption. They feel joy only in the suffering of others, find pleasure only in the ruination of everything that lives. For eons, beyond counting, these beings existed in eternal conflict with one another, their wars meaningless and their destruction contained within the boundaries of their chaotic realm. But that changed when Sargeras, the greatest of the Titans, turned his gaze upon the Twisting Nether and its demonic inhabitants. The Titans were beings of immense power, cosmic architects who shaped worlds and seeded life across the universe. They traveled through the cosmos in great ships of light, seeking world souls, nascent titans that slumbered within the cores of planets, waiting to be awakened. Sargeras was their champion, their warrior, the one who defended creation against the forces of chaos. His blade was forged from the stuff of stars. His armor was crafted from the essence of worlds. He was mighty beyond comprehension, a being whose power dwarfed that of any other creature in existence. For countless millennia, he hunted demons and imprisoned them on a world he created specifically for that purpose, a plane of banishment from which nothing could escape. This prison world was called Mardom. Sargeras filled Mardom with every demon he defeated, believing that by containing them, he could protect the universe from their corruption. But the endless war against chaos took its toll on the Titan's spirit. He saw the Void Lords, entities of pure darkness that sought to corrupt the very world souls that the Titans nurtured. He witnessed the lengths to which the forces of chaos would go to unmake everything that existed. And slowly, inexorably, despair took root in his heart. The great champion came to believe that the only way to prevent the void from corrupting all creation was to destroy it first. If everything burned, the void would have nothing to consume. If all life was extinguished, the darkness could not twist it to its purposes. It was a terrible logic, born of madness and despair, but Sargeras embraced it completely. He returned to Mardom, the prison world he had created. But instead of adding more demons to its population, he shattered the planet itself. The world broke apart, and from its fragments poured forth every demon that Sargeras had ever imprisoned. Millions upon millions of malevolent beings emerged from their confinement, freed by the very Titan who had once fought against them. These demons became the core of the Burning Legion, an army of destruction that Sargeras would lead across the cosmos. The former champion of the Titans had become their greatest enemy, and his legion would consume world after world in an endless crusade of annihilation. The shattered remains of Mardom drifted through the Twisting Nether, a reminder of what Sargeras had once tried to accomplish and what he had become. The demons that had once been imprisoned there now served as his most devoted soldiers, grateful to the Titan who had freed them and eager to spread destruction in his name. For eons, the Burning Legion swept across the universe. They found world after world, civilization after civilization, and they burned them all. Some worlds fell quickly, their defenders overwhelmed by the sheer numbers and power of the demonic horde. Others resisted longer, mounting desperate defenses that delayed but could not prevent their ultimate destruction. The Legion was patient, the Legion was eternal, and the Legion was inexorable. The methods of the Legion were as varied as they were terrible. Some worlds were destroyed through direct assault, armies of demons pouring through portals to overwhelm any resistance. Pit lords led the charges, their massive forms crushing everything in their path, their fell flames consuming cities and forests alike. Moarg engineers constructed war machines of unspeakable horror, devices that could tear through fortifications and reduce civilizations to rubble in moments. Other worlds fell through corruption rather than conquest. The Dreadlords, cunning and patient, would infiltrate societies and turn them against themselves. They whispered in the ears of rulers, planted seeds of discord and hatred, manipulated nations into wars that weakened them until the Legion could sweep in and claim the remains. These worlds died slowly, consumed from within by the very beings they trusted most. Still other worlds were offered a choice. The Eridar had been given such a choice long ago when Sargeras first encountered their civilization on Argus. He offered them power beyond imagining, knowledge of the cosmos, dominion over lesser beings. Most of them accepted, and they became the commanders of the Legion, the generals who led the crusade across the universe. Only a remnant refused and fled, becoming the Draenei, the exiles who would wander from world to world, seeking refuge from the very force they had rejected. The Eridar who joined the Legion became something more than what they had been. Gul'dan, the Deceiver, who had once been one of the three leaders of the Eridar, became the Legion's greatest manipulator, its master of corruption and subversion. He was the one who corrupted the orcs of Draenor, who created the Lich King, who orchestrated countless world-ending catastrophes. His cunning was matched only by his cruelty, and he took pleasure in destroying civilizations slowly, savoring their despair as they realized the futility of their resistance. Archimonde, the second of the Eridar leaders who had joined Sargeras, became the Legion's general of destruction. Where Gul'dan was subtle, Archimonde was overwhelming. He led the Legion's greatest assaults personally, wielding power that could shatter mountains and drain oceans. He delighted in absolute annihilation, in leaving nothing behind but ash and memory. Together, these beings commanded armies beyond counting. Demons of every variety served the Legion, the brutal Filgard soldiers who formed the bulk of their forces, the seductive succubi who corrupted mortals with promises of pleasure, the terrifying infernals who fell from the sky like burning meteors, the insidious imps who swarmed over battlefields in endless numbers. Each type of demon had its role, its function, its way of contributing to the Legion's eternal crusade. And at the apex of it all sat Sargeras, the Dark Titan, the fallen champion. His power dwarfed that of all his servants combined. He could snuff out stars with a gesture, crack worlds with a thought, unmake reality itself if he chose. He was the engine that drove the burning crusade, the will that united the demons, the dark purpose that gave their destruction meaning. For eons, this army swept across creation. World after world fell before them, their populations slaughtered or enslaved, their cultures erased, their very memory wiped from the cosmos. The universe grew darker with each conquest, quieter with each genocide. The Legion seemed unstoppable, inevitable, the final fate of all living things. But there was one world that would prove different from all the others. One world where the demons would find resistance that could not be broken, champions who would rise to meet them, and warriors who would sacrifice everything to stand against the tide of destruction. That world was Azeroth. The story of the Demon Hunters begins not with demons, but with elves. 10,000 years before the present day, the Night Elves had built a civilization of unparalleled beauty and power. At its heart was the Well of Eternity, a font of pure arcane energy that suffused the entire continent of Kalimdor with magical power. The Night Elves, or Kaldore as they called themselves, had learned to tap into this power, and their mastery of magic had elevated their society to heights that few other civilizations in the history of the universe could match. In a city called Suramar, there lived a family of some prominence. Among their children were twin brothers, born at the same moment but destined for very different paths. Their names were Illidan and Malfurion Stormrage. The city of Suramar was a marvel of night elf civilization, a place where magic infused every stone and every garden bloomed with supernatural beauty. The night elves who dwelt there were blessed with immortality, their lives stretching across millennia, their society refined through ages of peace and prosperity. They lived in harmony with the natural world, while also mastering the arcane energies that flowed from the Well of Eternity. The Stormrage family was well regarded in Suramar, though not among the highest nobility. They were scholars and practitioners of magic, respectable citizens who valued learning and wisdom. Into this family, the twin brothers were born, their arrival marked by signs that the priests and sages interpreted as omens of great importance. From their earliest days, the twins displayed remarkable potential. Both were blessed with amber-colored eyes, a rare trait among the night elves that was believed to signify a great destiny. Most night elves had silver eyes that glowed with inner light, the mark of their connection to the moon goddess Illun. But amber eyes were different. They appeared perhaps once in a generation, and those who bore them were said to be touched by fate itself, marked for deeds that would shape the course of history. Their people whispered that children born with such eyes would achieve feats of extraordinary significance, that they were marked by fate for momentous deeds. Priests of Illun offered blessings over the infant twins, and scholars debated what their amber eyes might portend. No one who knew the young Stormrage brothers doubted that these prophecies would prove true, though none could have imagined just how different the paths of the two brothers would become. Growing up alongside the twins was a young priestess named Tyrande Whisperwind. She came from a family devoted to the service of Illun, the moon goddess worshipped by the night elves. Even in her youth, Tyrande showed signs of the wisdom and compassion that would one day make her one of the most revered figures in night elf history. She had a gentle heart and a fierce spirit, a combination that drew both of the Stormrage brothers to her with equal intensity. The three children were inseparable, spending their days exploring the forests and studying the mysteries of their world. They would venture into the wild places beyond Suramar's walls, discovering hidden glades and ancient ruins. They would swim in crystal lakes and climb the branches of trees older than memory. They were children of a golden age, innocent of the darkness that would one day consume their world. But as the twins grew older, their paths began to diverge. Malfurion became fascinated with the natural world and the spirits that dwelt within it. He would spend hours in the forests surrounding Suramar, listening to the whisper of leaves and the songs of birds, feeling the pulse of life that flowed through every living thing. He sensed that there was a deeper magic in the world than the arcane energies that the night elves so prized, a magic older and more fundamental than anything the Highborn wielded. He sought out the great demigod Cenarius, lord of the forest, and begged to become his student. The journey to find Cenarius took Malfurion far from the comfortable streets of Suramar, deep into the primordial forests where the demigod made his home. Cenarius was an ancient being, born of the goddess Elune and the wild god Malorn. He had watched over the forests of Kalimdor since before the night elves had risen to civilization, and he viewed their arcane magic with a mixture of caution and concern. But when Cenarius met Malfurion, he saw something different. Here was a night elf who did not hunger for the power of the well, who did not seek to bend nature to his will. Here was a student who wished to learn, to understand, to become one with the natural world, rather than to dominate it. Cenarius agreed to teach him the ways of druidism, a form of magic that drew power not from the arcane, but from nature itself. The training was unlike anything Malfurion had experienced. Cenarius taught him to enter the Emerald Dream, a spiritual realm that existed alongside the physical world, a place where nature existed in its purest and most primal form. Malfurion learned to shift his shape, to take on the forms of the great creatures of the wild. He learned to call upon the power of sun and moon, of root and branch, of claw and wing. He became the first mortal druid, the first of his kind to truly understand the magic of life itself. Illidan took a different path. Where Malfurion saw beauty in the natural order, Illidan saw limitation. He had watched his brother spend months away from Suramar, communing with trees and animals, learning magic that seemed slow and weak compared to the power that flowed from the well of eternity. What good was being able to speak with birds when you could call down fire from the sky? What use was shifting your shape when you could reshape reality itself? The power of nature was slow and patient, building over centuries and millennia. But the arcane, the pure magical energy that flowed from the well of eternity, that power was immediate and boundless. Illidan devoted himself to the study of sorcery, spending long hours in the libraries and laboratories of Suramar. He studied under the greatest mages of his time, absorbing their knowledge and then surpassing it. He developed new techniques, created new spells, pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. His teachers were impressed by his talent, but concerned by his intensity. Illidan was never satisfied with what he had learned, never content to master a technique before moving on to the next. He had a hunger for power that seemed to grow with each new ability he gained, an ambition that could not be sated. Some of his instructors quietly suggested that he should slow down, should take time to develop wisdom alongside power. Illidan ignored them. He was destined for greatness. He could feel it in his bones, could see it in the amber glow of his eyes. The prophecies said that children with such eyes would accomplish great things, and Illidan intended to prove them right. He would become the most powerful sorcerer the Night Elves had ever known, and then he would become even more powerful than that. The brothers still loved each other, but a distance grew between them. Malfurion could not understand why Illidan was so obsessed with power, why he could not find contentment in the gentler magic of nature. He saw the hunger in his brother's eyes and feared where it might lead. He tried to speak to Illidan about balance, about the dangers of unchecked ambition, but his words fell on deaf ears. Illidan could not understand why Malfurion was willing to limit himself, to accept constraints when unlimited power was there for the taking. He saw his brother's druidism as a retreat from the world, a way of hiding from the potential that magic offered. They were twins, born at the same moment, but they saw the world through very different eyes. And then there was Tyrande. Both brothers loved her, had loved her since they were children, playing together in the forests of Valshara. She was intelligent and compassionate, beautiful and strong. She understood both brothers in ways that others did not, saw the good in each of them, even as she worried about their growing differences. But Tyrande's heart belonged to Malfurion. She loved the druid's gentle wisdom, his connection to the natural world, his willingness to serve something greater than himself. She saw in him a soul that matched her own, a partner with whom she could share eternity. Illidan's love went unrequited. He never stopped loving her, never stopped hoping that she might turn to him instead, but she never did. He watched as she and Malfurion grew closer, as their bond deepened into something that he could never share. This rejection became another source of darkness in Illidan's heart, another wound that would never fully heal. It did not diminish his love for her, but it added bitterness to the mix, a sense of loss and longing that would accompany him for 10,000 years. Illidan's pursuit of power led him to join the Moon Guard, an order of sorcerers who defended Night Elf society against magical threats. These were warriors who combined martial skill with arcane power, protecting the Night Elf civilization from the dangers that lurked beyond their borders. He rose quickly through their ranks, his talent for the arcane undeniable. He mastered spells that other sorcerers spent centuries learning. He developed techniques that had never been seen before, combinations of arcane energy and combat skill that made him devastating on the battlefield. He became one of their most powerful members, respected for his abilities, even if some were unsettled by his intensity, by the hunger in his amber eyes whenever he spoke of magic and power. It was during this time that the Burning Legion first turned its attention to Azeroth. The Well of Eternity was a beacon that shone across the cosmos, a light that called out to beings of immense power. Queen Ashara, the ruler of the Night Elves and the most powerful sorcerer of her age, heard whispers from the well's depths. A voice spoke to her, a voice of incredible age and terrible majesty. It promised her power beyond imagining, beauty eternal, dominion over all things. All she had to do was open a doorway. The voice belonged to Sargeras. Ashara was captivated. She believed herself the most perfect being in existence, and here was a god who agreed with her, who promised to remake the world in her image, who offered her a place at his side. She gathered her most loyal servants, the high-born sorcerers who served her court, and together they began the ritual that would open a portal to the twisting nether. The War of the Ancients had begun. The first demons to emerge from the portal were scouts, small creatures sent to test the defenses of this new world. Imps scurried through the streets of Zenashari, the capital city, their gibbering laughter echoing off marble walls. Fellhounds prowled the outskirts, their magical senses drawn to the power of the well like moths to flame. The night elves who encountered these creatures died quickly, their bodies burned or torn apart before they could even understand what was happening. But these scouts were only the beginning. Behind them came the soldiers of the Burning Legion in their terrible ranks. Felguard warriors marched in lockstep, their massive axes ready to cleave through any opposition. Doomguards soared overhead, raining fell fire upon any who dared to resist. Shivara priestesses chanted blasphemous hymns that sapped the will of those who heard them, and at the head of it all came the generals of the Legion, powerful beings who had conquered worlds beyond counting. Demons poured through the portal that Azshara and her highborn created. They swept across Kalimdor, slaughtering everything in their path. The great cities of the night elves fell one by one, their beautiful spires toppled, their gardens burned, their populations slaughtered or fled. Zenashari itself became the center of the demonic invasion, the portal growing larger with each passing day as more and more of the Legion's forces entered Azeroth. The Night Elves, who had known only peace and prosperity for generations, found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had ever imagined. Their armies had been ceremonial for centuries, trained for display rather than actual combat. Their warriors had faced nothing more dangerous than the occasional wild beast or disgruntled citizen. Now they stood against the most terrible army in existence, and they were utterly unprepared. The demons were creatures of pure destruction, beings who existed only to kill and corrupt. They could not be reasoned with, could not be bargained with, could not be stopped by any conventional means. They felt no fear, no hesitation, no mercy. They slaughtered infants in their cradles and elders in their beds, making no distinction between soldiers and civilians. They burned libraries that contained the accumulated wisdom of millennia. They desecrated temples that had stood since the dawn of Night Elf civilization. The screams of the dying filled the air across Kalimdor. Refugees fled before the advancing tide of demons, abandoning everything they had known in desperate hope of survival. But there was nowhere to run that the Legion could not follow, nowhere to hide that their hunters could not find. It seemed that the end of all things had come to Azeroth, that the world would burn as so many others had burned before it. Illidan fought against the demons, alongside his fellow Moonguard. These sorcerers were among the few forces capable of standing against the Legion's magic, and they threw themselves into battle with everything they had. Illidan unleashed spells of devastating power, incinerating demons by the dozen, creating shields that protected his allies from fell fire. He was brilliant in combat, his mastery of arcane magic allowing him to perform feats that amazed even his fellow Moonguard. But it was not enough. He watched as his companions fell, one by one, their magic insufficient against that endless tide of demonic invaders. For every demon they killed, 100 more emerged from the portal. For every position they held, 3 more were overrun. The Moon Guard were dying, and with them died any hope of conventional victory. Illidan realized that conventional tactics would not be enough, that the Night Elves were fighting a losing battle. Something had to change. Someone had to be willing to do what others would not. In a desperate gambit to provide power for the resistance, Illidan made a choice that would haunt him forever. He reached out to his fellow Moonguard, not to fight alongside them, but to drain their magical essence. He consumed their power, adding it to his own, and used that combined strength to strike at the demons. It was effective. His attacks became far more devastating than before, but his fellow Moonguard were left weakened, drained of their magic. Many of them died in the aftermath, unable to defend themselves against demonic attacks. Illidan had sacrificed them for power, had used them as fuel for his own spells. Some called it pragmatism, others called it murder. This was the first of many sacrifices that Illidan would make in his war against the Legion. It would not be the last. As the war continued, Illidan devised an even more radical plan. He would infiltrate the Legion, pretend to join their cause, and use that access to strike at them from within. He approached Queen Azshara and offered his services, convincing her that he had grown disillusioned with his fellow Night Elves and wished to join the winning side. Azshara was intrigued by this powerful sorcerer who seemed willing to betray his own people. She brought him before her demonic masters, and eventually before Sargeras himself. The Dark Titan was preparing to enter Azeroth through the portal at the Well of Eternity, and he looked upon Illidan with interest. Sargeras saw something in the Night Elf that he recognized. He saw hunger, ambition, a willingness to do whatever was necessary to achieve his goals. He saw a useful tool, perhaps, or perhaps a kindred spirit. And so Sargeras offered Illidan a gift. The transformation happened in an instant that seemed to last for eternity. Sargeras extended his power across the dimensional barrier, reaching through the portal to touch the Night Elf who knelt before him. Green fire, the color of fell magic, the color of demonic corruption, blazed forth from the Dark Titan's fingers. The Dark Titan's attention was both terrible and wonderful. Here was the being who had once been the greatest champion of order, the mightiest warrior among the Titans, the defender of all that was good. And here he was, corrupted beyond redemption, his power turned to the destruction of everything he had once protected. He looked upon Illidan with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of stars, and he saw something useful. Illidan's eyes burned. It was agony beyond description, pain beyond anything he had ever experienced. The flames did not simply harm his eyes, they consumed them utterly, leaving nothing but empty sockets that smoldered with fell energy. He screamed, a sound that seemed to tear itself from the depths of his soul. The pain was not merely physical, but spiritual, as if Sargeras was burning away some essential part of what made Illidan who he was. Everything went dark, and Illidan thought for a moment that he had been blinded completely, that Sargeras had punished him rather than rewarded him. The darkness was absolute, more complete than any night he had ever known. He was alone in the void, cut off from everything he had ever perceived. But then a new kind of vision emerged. It came slowly at first, shapes forming in the darkness. But these were not the shapes of the physical world. They were patterns of energy, currents of power that flowed through all things. Illidan realized that he was seeing magic itself, the fundamental forces that underlay reality. Where once Illidan had seen the world in colors and light, now he perceived something far more fundamental. He could see magic itself, the currents of arcane energy that flowed through all things. The night elves around him glowed with arcane power, their connection to the well of eternity visible as streams of blue light flowing through their bodies. He could see the fell corruption that emanated from demons, a sickly green radiance that pulsed with malevolence. He could sense the holy light that burned within the righteous, a golden warmth that felt distant and alien to his new nature. He could detect the shadow that clung to those who served the void, a darkness deeper than mere absence of light. His spectral sight allowed him to perceive the world in ways that no other being could, to see truths that were hidden from all other eyes. He could detect illusions instantly, could see through disguises and deceptions, could identify magical threats before they manifested. It was a gift of incredible power, but it was also a curse. The world was beautiful when seen through normal eyes, with colors and textures and the play of light and shadow. Through spectral sight, it was a realm of raw energy, stripped of comfortable illusion, revealing the harsh truths that most beings were never meant to perceive. Illidan would never again see a sunset, never appreciate the beauty of a flower, never look upon a face without seeing the magical essence that lurked beneath. Sargeras was not finished. The Dark Titan's power continued to flow into Illidan, inscribing patterns upon his flesh. The sensation was strange, not entirely painful, but deeply uncomfortable. Black tattoos spread across his body, covering his shoulders and chest and arms with intricate designs that pulsed with power. These markings were not mere decorations, but channels for demonic energy, increasing Illidan's arcane abilities far beyond what they had been before. The tattoos would be with him forever, a permanent reminder of the bargain he had made. They marked him as touched by the Burning Legion, as something other than a normal night elf. No amount of magic could remove them, no healing could erase them. They were part of him now, as integral to his being as his bones and blood. When the transformation was complete, Illidan rose to his feet. He was no longer merely a night elf sorcerer. He had become something new, something that had never existed before. He was the first demon hunter, or so he would one day be called. In that moment, he was simply Illidan Stormrage, a night elf who had sacrificed his eyes for power and received far more than he had bargained for. The spectral sight that Sargeras had granted him was both a gift and a curse, showing him wonders and horrors in equal measure. The fell tattoos upon his skin marked him as touched by demonic power, forever set apart from his people. He flexed his hands, feeling the new power that coursed through him. His magical abilities had been formidable before, but now they were something else entirely. He could channel fell energy as easily as he had once channeled arcane power. He could sense demonic presences, could track them through walls and across great distances. He had become a weapon against the very forces that had transformed him. But Illidan had not truly joined the Legion. His apparent defection had been a ploy, a way to get close enough to strike at the demons from within. He had learned secrets from Ashara's court, had gathered intelligence about the Legion's plans, had positioned himself to act when the moment was right. And now, with his new powers, he was more dangerous than ever before. The resistance against the Legion was led by Lord Cortalos Ravencrest, a noble who had rallied the Night Elves against the demonic invasion. Among his allies were Malfurion Stormrage and Tyrande Whisperwind, both of whom had become heroes of the resistance. Malfurion's druidic powers had proven invaluable against the demons, and Tyrande's prayers to Illun had brought divine aid to the beleaguered Night Elves. Illidan returned to them, bearing the gifts that Sargeras had bestowed upon him. His brother and the woman he loved were horrified by what he had become. The burning emptiness where his eyes had been, the demonic tattoos covering his body, the feel energy that now radiated from his very being, all of these marked him as something other than the night elf they had known. But Illidan proved his loyalty through action. He fought against the demons with terrible effectiveness, his new powers allowing him to cut through their ranks like a blade through cloth. He brought the intelligence he had gathered to the Resistance's leaders, revealing the Legion's plans and weaknesses. He demonstrated that whatever bargain he had made with Sargeras, his heart still belonged to his people. The War of the Ancients raged on for months, battles sweeping back and forth across Kalimdor. Demons and night elves clashed in desperate struggles, neither side able to achieve a decisive victory. The portal at the Well of Eternity continued to grow, and Sargeras drew ever closer to fully manifesting on Azeroth. His presence could be felt by all who possessed magical sensitivity, a vast and terrible awareness pressing against the barriers of reality. The war took a terrible toll on both sides. Cities that had stood for millennia were reduced to rubble. Forests that had been ancient when the Night Elves first gained sapience burned to ash. The land itself seemed to cry out in agony as demonic corruption spread across its surface. Countless Night Elves died, their bodies left where they fell or worse, raised as undead servants by the Legion's necromancers. But the Resistance fought on. They had no choice. Surrender meant annihilation, not just for themselves, but for their entire civilization, for everything they had ever built or loved or dreamed. They fought with the desperation of those who have nothing left to lose. The Resistance made their final stand at the Well of Eternity itself. This was the moment that would determine the fate of Azeroth, the culmination of everything the war had been building toward. While Malfurion and his allies worked to close the portal and prevent Sargeras from entering Azeroth, Illidan fought to buy them time. He led charges against the demonic defenders, his warglaves carving paths through their ranks, his spectral sight allowing him to anticipate their attacks before they were made. The ritual to close the portal was dangerous beyond measure. Malfurion called upon powers that he had never attempted to wield before, drawing on the strength of the Emerald Dream, on the blessing of Cenarius, on the very life force of the land itself. The energies required were immense, and the slightest error would have been catastrophic. In the end, the Resistance succeeded. Malfurion's ritual destabilized the Well of Eternity, and the resulting explosion shattered the continent of Kalimdor itself. The Great Sundering reshaped the world, breaking the land into the continents that would exist for the next 10,000 years. Mountains rose and fell, oceans rushed in to fill the gaps, and the very geography of Azeroth was transformed. The demons were hurled back into the twisting nether, and Sargeras was denied entry to Azeroth. But Illidan had other plans. Before the well could be completely destroyed, he had filled several vials with its waters. He believed that his people would still need this power, that the Legion would return one day, and the Night Elves would need every advantage they could get. He carried these vials with him as the world shattered around him, preserving what he saw as his people's greatest treasure. When the chaos of the Sundering subsided, the survivors of the Night Elf civilization gathered at Mount Hyjal, one of the highest peaks in the new landscape. They were fewer than before, their population devastated by the war and the cataclysm that followed. But they were alive, and they were free from the Legion's grasp. Illidan approached the sacred lake atop Mount Hyjal, and there he poured the waters he had collected from the Well of Eternity. A new well formed, smaller than the original, but still potent with arcane energy. Illidan believed he was ensuring his people's future, providing them with the power they would need to defend themselves against the Legion's inevitable return. Malfurion saw things differently. The arcane magic of the well had attracted the Legion to Azeroth in the first place. It was the beacon that had called Sargeras across the cosmos, the power source that had allowed Ashura to open her portal. To create a new well was to light that beacon once again, to invite the demons back to the world that had just barely escaped their grasp. The brothers argued, their fundamental disagreement about power and sacrifice coming to a head. Illidan could not understand why Malfurion would reject power that could be used against the Legion. Malfurion could not understand why Illidan would take such a risk, why he would endanger everything they had fought to save. In the end, the decision was not Malfurion's alone. The remaining leaders of Night Elf society gathered to judge Illidan for his actions. They looked upon him with eyes that saw only a traitor, a monster, a night elf who had made deals with demons and returned bearing their mark. They did not see the sacrifices he had made, the intelligence he had gathered, the battles he had fought. They saw only the fell tattoos upon his skin and the empty sockets where his eyes had been. Illidan was sentenced to imprisonment, not death, for Malfurion could not bring himself to execute his own brother, but eternal confinement in a prison from which there would be no escape. He would be held in the Barrow Deeps beneath Mount Hyjal, guarded by the Watchers who had served Mayav Shadowsong. Tyrande said nothing in Illidan's defense. She had made her choice long ago, had given her heart to Malfurion. But there was something in her eyes as Illidan was led away, something that might have been pity or regret or sorrow. Illidan saw it with his spectral sight, saw the emotions that played across her face. Even as the guards took him to his new prison, he would have 10,000 years to think about that expression, to wonder what might have been, to rage against the injustice of his fate. The Barrow Deeps were a prison unlike any other. Carved from the living rock beneath Mount Hyjal, they were designed to hold the most dangerous prisoners in Night Elf society. The tunnels wound deep into the earth, far from the light of the sun and the moon, far from the world above. The stone itself was infused with magical wards that prevented teleportation, that blocked scrying, that made escape by any known means utterly impossible. The cells within the Barrow Deeps were works of cruel precision. Each one was designed to contain a specific type of threat, with wards and barriers calibrated to neutralize the abilities of its occupant. For Illidan, the cell was particularly elaborate, Chains of enchanted adamantine held his limbs, their magic designed to suppress the fell power that coursed through his body. Runes carved into the walls prevented him from accessing the arcane energy that he had once commanded so easily. His spectral sight remained, but there was nothing to see in his cell but the endless gray of stone. Maiev Shadowsong was the warden of this prison, and she took her duty with deadly seriousness. She came from a military family, had trained as a warrior since her youth, had proven herself time and again in service to the Night Elf people. When the position of warden was created, she had been the obvious choice. Her dedication was beyond question, her skills beyond compare, her hatred for those who threatened her people absolute. She had fought in the War of the Ancients, had seen the destruction that the Legion had wrought, and she believed that Illidan was responsible for much of it. He had dealt with demons, had accepted Sargeras' gifts, had transformed himself into something that was no longer truly Night Elf. His creation of the new Well of Eternity had been the final proof of his treachery, the evidence that he could never be trusted. Maiev visited Illidan's cell regularly, not out of any requirement, but because she believed in the importance of vigilance. She would stand outside the magical barriers that contained him, watching him with eyes that held nothing but contempt. Sometimes she would speak to him, though he rarely responded. She would remind him of his crimes, of the lives he had destroyed, of the trust he had betrayed. She would tell him that he deserved far worse than imprisonment, that the mercy shown by his brother was a weakness that she would never have displayed. Illidan endured these visits in silence. He had learned early in his imprisonment that arguing with Maiev was pointless. She had made up her mind about him before he ever entered the Barrow Deeps, and nothing he could say would change her opinion. So he sat in his chains and listened to her condemnations, and he waited. For 10,000 years, Maiev watched over Illidan's prison. For 10,000 years, she ensured that he never escaped, never saw the light of day, never had the chance to threaten her people again. Her duty became her obsession, her purpose in life, the one thing that gave meaning to her existence. As the millennia passed, her watchers became a sisterhood of sorts, women who had dedicated their lives to the same cause. They trained together, patrolled together, reinforced each other in their conviction that Illidan and the other prisoners in the Barrow Deeps represented an eternal threat. The outside world moved on, Night Elf society evolved and changed, but the Watchers remained constant, forever vigilant against the darkness they contained. Some of the other Watchers questioned whether eternal imprisonment was truly necessary. Surely after 5,000 years, after 10,000 years, the prisoners had been sufficiently punished. Surely they could be released, allowed to try to redeem themselves, given a chance to prove that they had changed. Maiev dismissed such talk immediately. There was no redemption for beings like Illidan. There was only containment, forever, until the ending of the world. The moment they relaxed their vigilance, the moment they allowed themselves to hope that their prisoners might have reformed, that would be the moment when the darkness escaped and threatened everything they had sworn to protect. And Illidan waited. He meditated on his failure, on the choices that had led him to this place. He replayed the War of the Ancients in his mind, wondering if there was anything he could have done differently, any path that might have led to a different outcome. He thought about Tyrande, about the love that had never been returned, about the happiness that might have been his if only she had chosen him instead of Malfurion. The years stretched into decades, the decades into centuries, the centuries into millennia. The world above changed, Night Elf society evolving and adapting to the new reality of a shattered world. The new well of eternity was planted with a seed that grew into the world tree Nordrassil, its roots covering the waters and preventing them from attracting the Legion's attention again. But Illidan knew none of this. He sat in his cell beneath the mountain, preserved by magic, unchanging while the world moved on without him. His spectral sight showed him only the walls of his prison, the wards that held him, the occasional watcher who came to ensure he had not escaped. 10,000 years is a long time to wait. 10,000 years is a long time to plan. The Third War changed everything. The Burning Legion had never forgotten about Azeroth. For 10,000 years, they had plotted their return, seeking ways to bypass the defenses that had been erected against them. They had learned from their defeat during the War of the Ancients, had analyzed their failures, had developed new strategies. The world that had denied them entry would fall in time. They only needed to find the right approach. Their solution was elegant in its cruelty. Rather than attempting another direct assault, they would create agents on Azeroth itself, forces that would weaken the world's defenses from within. The Lich King was their primary instrument, a being of terrible power created by Kil'jaeden from the soul of the orc shaman Ner'zhul. Encased in ice and armor, placed in the frozen continent of Northrend, the Lich King served as their advance force. His scourge swept across the eastern kingdoms, slaughtering the living and raising them as undead slaves. The Lich King could animate the corpses of those who fell, turning the defenders' own dead against them. Every battle the living fought only added to the scourge's numbers. It was a war that could not be won through conventional means. The Legion's agents worked to summon their masters back to Azeroth. In Lordaeron, the kingdom that had once been the greatest human nation, the dead rose to overwhelm the living. Prince Arthas Menethil was manipulated into taking up the cursed blade, Frostmourne, a weapon forged by the Lich King specifically to corrupt him. The prince, once a champion of the light, became the Lich King's champion, the instrument through which the scourge would spread even further. Arthas murdered his own father, King Tyrannus. He led the scourge against his own kingdom, destroying the cities he had once sworn to protect. He sought out the means to summon the Burning Legion itself, the culmination of the Lich King's true purpose. Cities fell, nations crumbled, and it seemed that nothing could stop the tide of death. But the Night Elves remained, hidden in their forests on the continent of Kalimdor. They had watched the world from a distance, their immortality preserved by the world tree Nordrassil, their isolation maintained by ancient magic. They knew of the other races that had risen and fallen on Azeroth, knew of the wars that had swept across the eastern kingdoms, but they had chosen not to intervene. The outside world was not their concern. Now the Legion was coming for them too, and they would need every weapon at their disposal to survive. The demons had identified Nordrassil as a threat. The world tree's roots covered the second well of eternity, preventing its energies from attracting the Legion's attention. If Nordrassil could be destroyed, if the well could be accessed, the demons could open portals large enough to bring through their greatest champions. Archimond himself, the Defiler, one of the Eridar lords who had joined Sargeras at the beginning, was preparing to lead the assault. Tyrande Whisperwind, now the High Priestess of Illun and one of the leaders of Night Elf society, understood the threat they faced. She had lived through the War of the Ancients, had seen what the Legion could do. She knew that the Night Elves, even with their immortality and their magic, could not stand alone against the Burning Legion. She needed allies. More importantly, she needed weapons. Tyrande made a decision that would change history. She went to the Barrow Deeps, to the prison where Illidan had spent the last 10,000 years. She confronted Maiev Shadowsong, who refused to release the prisoner under any circumstances. Maiev was furious. She had dedicated her entire existence to keeping Illidan imprisoned, had spent 10 millennia ensuring that he never escaped. The suggestion that he should simply be released, that all her sacrifice should be for nothing, was an insult beyond bearing. She would not allow it. But Tyrande had not come to ask permission. Using the power of Illun, she fought past Maiev's watchers and reached Illidan's cell. The battle was brief but intense, Tyrande's divine magic clashing with the martial skills of the Watchers. In the end, the High Priestess's determination prevailed. She broke the wards that held him, shattered the barriers that had kept him imprisoned for 10 millennia. Illidan emerged from his confinement, blinking in the light of the outside world for the first time in ages beyond counting. He was exactly as he had been when he entered the prison. The spectral sight that Sargeras had granted him still blazed from his empty eye sockets. The fell tattoos still covered his skin. 10,000 years of imprisonment had not diminished his power or faded his marks. He was unchanged while the world had transformed utterly around him. The sensation of freedom was overwhelming. For 10 millennia, Illidan had been confined to a single cell, his world bounded by stone walls and magical wards. Now the sky stretched above him, vast and open, and he could feel the currents of magic that flowed through the land. He was free. Tyrande explained what had happened, the return of the Legion, the threat to everything they held dear. She spoke of the Scourge and the Lich King, of Archimonde's coming and the danger to Nordrassil. She asked Illidan to fight alongside his people once more, to use his powers against the demons as he had during the War of the Ancients. Illidan agreed. How could he refuse? The woman he loved was asking for his help. The demons who had corrupted him were threatening to destroy the world. And after 10,000 years of imprisonment, he was finally free. The Legion had established a presence in Fellwood, corrupting the forest with their fell magic. At the heart of this corruption was the Skull of Gul'dan, an artifact of immense power that had once belonged to the greatest warlock the orcs had ever produced. The demons were using it to spread their influence across the land, and it represented both a threat and an opportunity. Illidan went to Fellwood alone. He knew what he was planning to do, knew that his brother and Tyrande would not approve. But he believed it was necessary, believed that only by embracing the power of demons could he hope to defeat them. He found the Skull of Gul'dan at the center of a demonic stronghold, guarded by the dreadlord Tichondrius. The demon was a cunning creature, one of the leaders of the Legion's forces on Azeroth. He had helped orchestrate the corruption of Arthas and the fall of Lordaeron, had played puppet master to the Scourge's rise. He was ancient beyond mortal comprehension, had served the Burning Legion since its founding, had destroyed civilizations and corrupted heroes across countless worlds. The skull itself was a thing of terrible power. Gul'dan had been the greatest warlock the orcs had ever produced, a being who had traded everything, his people, his worlds, his very soul for demonic power. When he died, his skull had retained much of that power, becoming an artifact that radiated fell corruption. The Legion had placed it in Fellwood specifically to spread that corruption, to transform the once beautiful forest into a twisted mockery of nature. Tichondrius stood before the skull, confident in his power, certain that no mortal could challenge him in this place. He had sensed Illidan's approach, had watched the demon hunter make his way through the corrupted forest. He was curious, amused even, to see what this creature who had once dealt with his masters might want. Illidan didn't care. He had not come to negotiate, not come to parley, not come for anything except the skull and the power it contained. Tichondrius realized this too late, began to summon his defenses, but Illidan was already moving. He shattered the skull's containment and absorbed its power into himself. The moment the fell energy touched him, Illidan knew he had made a choice from which there was no return. The power that had once belonged to Gul'dan, the accumulated strength of countless demonic pacts and sacrifices, all of it flowed into Illidan's body. It was like nothing he had ever experienced, not even the transformation Sargeras had wrought upon him 10,000 years before. The energy burned through his veins, reshaping him from within. His muscles expanded, his bones lengthened, his skin darkened and hardened. He could feel things growing from his body, new appendages that had not been there before. The pain was excruciating, but Illidan did not scream. He had endured worse. He would endure this. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. Wings burst from Illidan's back, great leathery appendages that resembled those of a demon. They stretched wide, casting shadows across the corrupted ground, powerful enough to carry him through the sky. His skin darkened to a deep purple and hardened, taking on a demonic texture that was more armor than flesh. Horns sprouted from his forehead, curving back over his skull like the crown of some infernal king. His feet twisted into cloven hooves, his body growing larger and more powerful than before. Claws extended from his fingers, sharp enough to rend steel. His spectral sight blazed brighter than ever, able to see not just magic, but the very essence of life and death, corruption and purity. He stood taller than any night elf, larger than most demons, a being of terrifying power and presence. He had become a demon, but unlike the demons who served the Legion, Illidan retained his free will. The power of Gul'dan's skull had enhanced him, had completed the transformation that Sargeras had begun 10,000 years before, but it had not corrupted his purpose. He was still Illidan Stormrage. He still fought against the Burning Legion. Tichondrius realized too late what had happened. The Dreadlord attacked, but Illidan was far more powerful now than he had ever been before. The battle was brutal and decisive, and when it was over, Tichondrius was dead, and Illidan stood victorious amid the ruins of the demonic stronghold. But his victory came at a cost. When Malfurion learned what Illidan had done, He was horrified. His brother had not merely accepted demonic power, he had embraced it, completely had transformed himself into the very thing they were fighting against. How could anyone trust a demon, even one who claimed to fight for the side of light? Malfurion confronted Illidan and demanded that he leave. The Night Elves could not accept a demon among them, could not trust someone who had made such terrible choices. Illidan had saved them from Tichondrius, yes, but at what cost to his own soul? What guarantees were there that he would not turn against them in the future? Illidan protested his innocence, argued that he had done what was necessary to defeat the Legion. But Malfurion would not be swayed. The decision was made. Illidan was banished from Night Elf lands, cast out from his own people once again. He had been freed from prison only to become an exile. The demon lord Kil'jaeden appeared to Illidan in a vision. The Eridar was one of the most powerful beings in the Burning Legion, second only to Sargeras himself. He had commanded legions, destroyed worlds, orchestrated the corruptions of entire civilizations, and now he was offering Illidan a chance at redemption. Kil'jaeden explained that there was a being of immense power on a world called Draenor, the shattered remains of a planet that had once been whole. This being was the Lich King, the undead entity that controlled the Scourge. The Lich King had been created by the Legion to serve their purposes, but he had grown too independent, too ambitious. He needed to be destroyed. If Illidan succeeded in this task, Kil'jaeden promised, he would be granted a place of honor in the Legion. He would be given power beyond imagining, armies to command, worlds to rule. All he had to do was destroy the Lich King. Illidan considered the offer. He did not trust Kil'jaeden, did not believe that the demon had his best interests at heart. But the alternative was a life of exile, hunted by his own people, despised by everyone who knew what he had become. At least with Kil'jaeden's backing, he would have purpose, direction, resources. He agreed. But even as he accepted the Demon Lord's bargain, Illidan was planning a betrayal of his own. He had no intention of truly serving the Legion. He would use their resources, take advantage of their power, but ultimately he would turn against them. The Burning Legion had taken his eyes, had marked him with their corruption, had made him into a monster. He would repay them in kind. Illidan gathered allies for his mission. The Naga, a race of serpentine creatures who had once been night elves before being transformed by the old gods, answered his call. Their queen, Azshara, who had served the Legion during the War of the Ancients, now sent her servants to aid Illidan. Among them was Lady Vashj, a cunning and powerful Naga who would become one of Illidan's most loyal lieutenants. And together, they traveled to the shattered world of Draenor, now called Outland after its destruction. There they found a world of floating islands and twisted landscapes, a realm where the laws of nature no longer applied. And there they began their campaign against the Lich King. But the Lich King was not on Outland. He was on Azeroth in the frozen continent of Northrend. Illidan realized that he would need to cross between worlds to complete his mission, would need to find a way back to Azeroth to strike at his target. In the meantime, he turned his attention to Outland itself. The shattered world was ruled by a pit lord named Magtheridon, a demon who commanded a vast army of fell orcs. These orcs had been corrupted by drinking demon blood, twisted into savage creatures who served the Legion's purposes. Magtheridon used them to maintain his grip on Outland, crushing any who dared to oppose him. Illidan saw an opportunity. If he could defeat Magtheridon and claim Outland for himself, he would have a base of operations from which to launch his attacks against the Legion. He would have armies at his command, resources at his disposal, a fortress from which no enemy could easily dislodge him. The assault on Magtheridon's stronghold was brutal and bloody. Illidan led his forces personally, his warglaves carving through the fell orcs who stood in his way. Lady Vashj and her Naga fought alongside him, their magical abilities complementing his own. When they finally reached Magtheridon himself, the battle was fierce. But Illidan was no longer the night elf sorcerer who had fought in the War of the Ancients. He was a demon hunter, empowered by Sargeras' gift and Gul'dan's skull, enhanced by 10,000 years of meditation and planning. Magtheridon was powerful, but Illidan was more powerful still. When the battle was over, Magtheridon was defeated, but not destroyed. Illidan chose to keep the Pit Lord alive, imprisoned beneath the fortress that had once been his stronghold. The demon's blood could be used to create more Fail Orcs, soldiers who would serve Illidan's purposes. It was a pragmatic decision, using the enemy's resources against them. Illidan claimed the Black Temple as his seat of power. The massive structure had once been a sacred site of the Draenei, the peaceful race that had inhabited Draenor before the Orcs' corruption. Now it would serve as the headquarters of Illidan's new empire. But conquering Outland was only the beginning. Illidan had made a promise to kill Jaden, and the Demon Lord would not wait forever for results. Illidan gathered his forces for an assault on Northrend. He would strike at the Lich King directly, destroy the undead abomination that threatened both Azeroth and the Legion's plans. Victory would cement his position, would prove his value to kill Jaden, would buy him time to continue building his power. The campaign to reach Northrend was itself a challenge. The frozen continent lay far to the north of the eastern kingdoms, accessible only by sea or through magical portals. Illidan assembled a fleet of ships, crewed by Naga and commanded by Lady Vashj, and set sail across the frozen ocean. The journey was treacherous. Storms battered the fleet, ice floes threatened to crush the ships, and scouts from the Scourge harassed them constantly. The undead had no need for warmth or rest, and they attacked without warning from beneath the frozen waves, dragging sailors to icy deaths. But Illidan's determination drove them forward. He stood at the prow of his flagship, his spectral sight piercing the blizzards that would have blinded any normal vision. He could see the currents of death that flowed from Northrend, could sense the vast concentration of necromantic energy that was the Lich King. He was coming for his target, and nothing would stop him. But the assault was a disaster. Northrend was the Lich King's domain, and every inch of it served his purposes. The frozen land itself seemed to fight against the invaders. Ice storms swept down from nowhere, freezing soldiers where they stood. The dead rose from the snow, ancient corpses that had lain undisturbed for centuries, now given terrible new purpose. The very air seemed thick with malevolence, sapping the strength of those who breathed it. The Lich King's forces were more powerful than Illidan had anticipated. The undead scourge seemed endless, rising again and again, no matter how many times they were cut down. For every zombie that fell, 2 more shambled forward. For every ghoul that was incinerated, A dozen more emerged from the frozen graves that dotted the landscape, and the Lich King himself was far stronger than Illidan had expected. Ner'zhul's spirit had merged fully with Arthas Menethil, creating a being whose power exceeded the sum of its parts. He drew strength from every undead creature on Northrend, from every soul trapped in his service, from the very land itself, his power augmented by the countless souls he had consumed. The battle at the Frozen Throne was the culmination of the campaign. Illidan had fought his way through miles of frozen wilderness, through armies of undead, through the terrible defenses that surrounded the Lich King's sanctum. His forces had been whittled down to a fraction of their original strength. But he had reached his target. Illidan faced Arthas Menethil, the Death Knight who had become the Lich King's champion. Their duel was legendary, two beings of immense power clashing in the frozen wastes of Northrend. Lightning and fellfire scorched the ice. Warglaive and Runeblade sparked against each other. The two combatants moved faster than mortal eyes could follow, their battle a blur of violence and power. Illidan lost. The duel was close, far closer than most observers had expected. Illidan pushed Arthas to his limits, came within inches of delivering a killing blow on multiple occasions. But in the end, Frostmourne found its mark. The cursed blade that had claimed so many souls tasted Illidan's blood, carved a wound across his chest that would have killed any lesser being. Arthas struck him down, and Illidan fell to the ice, his body broken, his pride shattered. He had failed in his mission, had been defeated by the very enemy he had come to destroy. But he was not dead. Lady Vashj and his other allies rescued him from the battlefield, dragging his broken body away even as the scourge closed in. They carried him back through the portal to Outland, barely escaping with their lives. Illidan survived, though barely, and he retreated to the Black Temple to lick his wounds. The wound Frostmourne had inflicted festered with necromantic energy, resisting all attempts at magical healing. For months, Illidan lay near death, his consciousness fading in and out, his life sustained only by the demonic power that coursed through his body. Kil'jaeden was not pleased. The Demon Lord had expected Illidan to destroy the Lich King, had expected results. Instead, Illidan had failed spectacularly, had proven himself incapable of completing even this simple task. The Eridar's anger was terrible to behold, and Illidan knew that his life hung by a thread. When Kil'jaeden manifested at the Black Temple, his rage was palpable. The Demon Lord's power suffused the entire structure, making even Illidan's most loyal servants cower in terror. He had been patient with the Demon Hunter, had given him resources and time, and Illidan had repaid that patience with failure. But Illidan was cunning, far more cunning than Kil'jaeden realized. Even from his sickbed, even with his body still recovering from Arthas's blade, he played the game of manipulation. He promised the Demon Lord that he would try again, that he would find a way to succeed where he had failed before. He just needed more time, more resources, more power. Give him these things, and he would deliver the Lich King's destruction. Kil'jaeden agreed, but his patience was wearing thin. Illidan had been given a chance, and he knew that there would not be many more. In the Black Temple, Illidan began to plan his true campaign. He had never intended to serve the Burning Legion. His alliance with Kil'jaeden was a means to an end, a way to gather resources and build power. But his ultimate goal had always been the Legion's destruction, not its service. The demons had taken everything from him: his eyes, his freedom, his people's respect. He would repay them in kind. The key was the Demon Hunters. During his time in the Barrow Deeps, Illidan had thought long and hard about the nature of his power. Sargeras had transformed him into a weapon against the Legion, had given him abilities that were perfectly suited to hunting and destroying demons. But Illidan was just one being, limited in what he could accomplish alone. What if there were more like him? What if he could create an army of demon hunters, warriors who shared his powers and his purpose? The idea took root and grew. Illidan began to experiment, to search for elves who might be suitable candidates for transformation. He looked for those who had lost everything to the Legion, who burned with hatred for the demons, who were willing to sacrifice anything for a chance at vengeance. There were many such elves in Outland. The Blood Elves who had followed Prince Kael'thas Sunstrider to Outland were particularly receptive. Their homeland of Quel'Thalas had been devastated by the Scourge, their magical source the Sunwell destroyed. They understood loss, understood the hunger for revenge, understood the willingness to embrace dark powers for the sake of survival. Illidan approached Kael'thas with a proposal. He would train Blood Elf warriors as demon hunters, would share his secrets with them, would give them the power to fight against the Legion. In return, Kael'thas would provide soldiers for Illidan's army, Blood Elf forces that would supplement his Naga and Fel Orc legions. Kael'thas agreed, and the first Blood Elf demon hunters began their training. The process of becoming a demon hunter was not for the faint of heart. Illidan had been transformed by Sargeras himself, his power granted directly by the Dark Titan. His followers could not rely on such a gift. They would have to earn their transformation through blood and sacrifice. Those who sought to become demon hunters were warned of what awaited them. Illidan himself would address the aspirants, his spectral sight sweeping over them, assessing their potential and their resolve. He told them what they would face, what they would lose, what they would become. He offered them the chance to walk away, to return to their normal lives, to seek a different path in the fight against the Legion. Most stayed. They had already lost too much to turn back now. Their families had been slaughtered by demons. Their homes had been reduced to ash. Their worlds had been shattered, literally in the case of the Blood Elves, who had seen Quel'Thalas devastated. They had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain in the form of vengeance. The ritual began with a demon. Illidan's demon hunters would capture a demon, usually an imp or a fellhound, something powerful enough to provide useful abilities, but not so powerful that it could overwhelm the aspirant. The capture itself was a test, a way of ensuring that the aspirant had the skills and the courage to face demonic enemies in combat. Those who could not manage even this first step were dismissed before the true trials began. The demon would be bound, held in place by magical chains forged specifically for this purpose. Runes of containment were inscribed on the floor and walls, preventing the creature from drawing on outside power or calling for aid. It was rendered unable to fight or flee, though it could still speak, could still try to bargain or threaten or deceive. Many demons attempted these tactics. They offered power, promised knowledge, threatened terrible vengeance. Some aspirants listened to these whispers and were corrupted before the ritual even truly began. They would try to free the demon, to join it, to accept its bargains. These aspirants were killed immediately, their bodies disposed of, and their names struck from the records. They had failed the most basic test, the ability to resist demonic temptation. Then the aspirant would kill the demon and consume its heart. The killing was not easy. Even a bound demon was dangerous, its epheal energy lashing out in its death throes. Aspirants were burned, clawed, cursed. Some died in the act of killing their demon, their bodies unable to withstand the backlash of fell power that accompanied the creature's demise. But those who succeeded faced an even more terrible trial. The demon's heart was still warm, still pulsing with residual life, still radiating the fell corruption that had sustained the creature. The aspirant was expected to consume it whole, to swallow the physical manifestation of demonic evil. The taste was said to be beyond foul, the flesh of a demon burning with fell energy that scorched the mouth and throat as it went down. Some aspirants vomited immediately, their bodies rejecting the alien substance. They would be forced to try again, to consume another heart, until either they succeeded or their bodies gave out entirely. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to what came next. As the demon's essence was absorbed into the aspirant's body, visions began to flood their mind. They saw what the demon had seen. They witnessed the destruction of worlds, the slaughter of entire civilizations, the endless burning crusade of the Burning Legion. They experienced the demon's memories as if they were their own, lived through countless atrocities from the perspective of the perpetrator. They felt the demon's hunger, its hatred, its joy in destruction. They understood, for a terrible moment, why the Legion did what it did. They saw the universe as Sargeras saw it, as a flawed creation that needed to be purged. They felt the seductive pull of nihilism, the terrible logic that said nothing mattered anyway, so why not embrace the darkness? Many aspirants went mad at this point. The visions were too much, the horror too overwhelming. Their minds shattered, and they became gibbering wrecks, unable to function, unable to fight, unable to do anything but scream. These broken souls were kept in special cells beneath the Black Temple, cared for as best they could be, but most never recovered. They had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had consumed them. But those who survived the visions faced an even greater challenge. The demon's spirit, though its body was destroyed, did not simply disappear. It remained within the aspirant, a constant presence whispering in their mind, trying to corrupt them, trying to turn them to the Legion's cause. The whispers never stopped. In quiet moments, in dreams, in the depths of meditation, the demon spoke. It promised power, offered temptation, threatened consequences. It reminded the aspirant of their failures, their doubts, their fears. It tried to find any weakness, any crack in their mental armor through which it could worm its influence. To silence these whispers, the aspirants would blind themselves. The ritual of blinding was perhaps the most terrible part of the transformation. Aspirants were given a choice. They could cut out their own eyes, or they could have them burned away by fell fire. Most chose the latter, believing that it would be quicker, less agonizing. They were wrong. They would take their own eyes, destroying their physical sight in order to develop the spectral sight that Illidan possessed. The pain was excruciating, beyond anything most beings could imagine. The fell fire burned not just flesh, but spirit, searing away the aspirant's connection to the visual world in a conflagration that seemed to last for hours. But it served a purpose. The blinding cut off one avenue through which the demon could influence them, removing the distractions of the physical world and forcing the aspirant to develop new senses. It opened their perception to a new way of seeing, one that perceived not light, but magic, not appearance, but essence. Many aspirants died during this process. Their bodies could not handle the transformation, could not survive the trauma of blinding and demonic absorption. They collapsed, their hearts giving out, their minds shutting down, their spirits departing for whatever afterlife awaited them. Others survived physically, but failed spiritually. The demon within them grew too strong, overwhelming their will, corrupting their purpose. These corrupted hunters had to be put down quickly before they could turn on their fellow aspirants or escape to join the legion they were meant to fight. But those who survived emerged as demon hunters. Their new eyes could see magic in all its forms. They could perceive the fell corruption that marked demons, could detect demonic influence, even when it was hidden behind layers of illusion. They could sense the presence of their enemies long before those enemies were aware of them, and they were bound to a demon. The spirit they had absorbed remained within them, a constant voice in the back of their mind. It whispered temptations, promised power, tried to convince them to embrace the Legion's cause. The demon hunter had to resist these whispers constantly, had to maintain their will and their purpose in the face of unending corruption. To help with this struggle, Illidan's demon hunters received arcane tattoos similar to his own. These markings channeled magical energy that helped suppress the inner demon, kept it contained and controlled. But the tattoos were not perfect. The demon was always there, always waiting, always ready to take over if the hunter's will faltered. Perhaps 1 in 5 aspirants survived the full training. The rest died or went insane, their bodies and minds unable to handle the transformation. Those who emerged from the process were changed forever, set apart from their people, marked as something both more and less than the elves they had once been. They called themselves the Illidari. The Illidari trained in the chambers beneath the Black Temple. There, away from prying eyes, they practiced the techniques that would make them the most effective demon hunters in existence. The training grounds were vast, carved from the black stone of the temple's foundations, lit by fell fire that cast everything in shades of green and shadow. New demon hunters began their training immediately after the transformation ritual, while their bodies and minds were still adjusting to the changes they had undergone. This was deliberate. The first days and weeks after becoming a demon hunter were the most dangerous, the time when the inner demon was strongest and the hunter's control was weakest. Intensive training gave them something to focus on, a way to channel their rage and pain into something constructive. Their instructors were those who had undergone the transformation first, the most experienced of Illidan's followers. Each instructor specialized in a different aspect of demon hunting, and each student learned from all of them in turn. Vareda's Fell Soul, a blood elf who had been among the first of Kael'thas's warriors to become a demon hunter, taught them about demons. His lectures were exhaustive, covering every type of demon that served the Burning Legion. He explained the different types of demonic creatures, their weaknesses and strengths, the best ways to fight and kill them. He taught them about the foot soldiers of the Legion, the brutish Felguard who relied on overwhelming force, the cunning imps who attacked in swarms, the Voidwalkers who could absorb magical attacks. He explained how each type could be countered, what tactics worked best against them, and what mistakes to avoid. But he also taught them about the more dangerous demons, the Dreadlords, masters of manipulation who could turn allies against each other with their mental powers. The Pit Lords, enormous creatures of destruction who could crush entire armies beneath their hooves. The Eridar Lords, beings of godlike power who commanded armies and wielded magic that could unmake reality itself. The students learned to recognize demonic corruption even when it was hidden. They learned to detect the subtle signs of Legion influence, the way shadows moved wrongly, the taste of fell energy in the air, the unnatural behaviors of corrupted individuals. A demon hunter who could identify an infiltrator before they struck was worth a dozen who could only react to an attack. Outlandian taught infiltration, the art of moving unseen among enemies. She was a night elf of great age, one of the few who had served under Illidan since before the fall of the Black Temple. Her expertise in stealth was legendary, even among the Illidari, and she had conducted more behind-the-lines operations than anyone could count. Demon hunters could not always rely on brute force. Sometimes they needed to be subtle, to slip past defenses and strike at the heart of demonic operations. Outlandian showed them how to blend into shadows, how to move without being detected, how to become invisible even to spectral sight. She taught them patience, the ability to wait for hours or days for the perfect moment to strike. She taught them observation, the skill of gathering intelligence without revealing their presence. She taught them assassination, the art of killing a target quickly and quietly, leaving no trace and raising no alarm. The students practiced on each other at first, then on the fell orcs who served as guards throughout Illidan's domain. Those who were caught faced punishment, not from their instructors, but from their targets. This taught them that failure in the field meant death, that there were no second chances when infiltrating Legion territory. Netherell trained them in weapons. He was a blood elf who had lost his entire family to the Scourge and had embraced the path of the demon hunter as a way of channeling his grief into purpose. His mastery of the warglaive was unparalleled, and he expected the same level of skill from his students. The warglaives that demon hunters wielded were not ordinary blades. They were curved, double-bladed weapons that required special techniques to use effectively. The design was Illidan's own, based on the weapons he had wielded since the War of the Ancients, refined over 10,000 years of meditation and combat. Each blade was perfectly balanced, light enough to be wielded at incredible speed, sharp enough to cut through demonic hide and armor alike. Netheril drilled his students until they could fight with their warglaives as naturally as they breathed, until the weapons became extensions of their own bodies. He taught them forms, intricate patterns of attack and defense that built upon each other. He taught them to fight one opponent or many, to adapt to different environments, to use their surroundings to their advantage. The training was brutal. Students fought each other with real blades, protected only by their reflexes and their developing combat instincts. Injuries were common, deaths not unknown, But those who survived became warriors of unparalleled lethality, capable of cutting through demons like scythes through wheat. And Illidan himself taught them about the most dangerous technique of all, metamorphosis. Within every demon hunter lurked a demon, the spirit they had absorbed during their transformation. This demon was usually kept suppressed, controlled by the arcane tattoos and the hunter's own will. But there was a way to unleash it, to allow the demonic essence to suffuse the hunter's body and transform them into something more than mortal. In metamorphosis, a demon hunter became a demon themselves. They grew horns and wings, their skin darkened and hardened, their power increased exponentially. In this form, they could match the mightiest demons in single combat, could tear through lesser foes like a scythe through wheat. But metamorphosis was incredibly dangerous. The longer a hunter remained in their demonic form, the stronger the inner demon became. If they stayed too long, if they allowed the transformation to go too deep, they might not be able to return to their normal state. The demon would take over permanently, and the hunter would become just another monster to be destroyed. Only the most skilled demon hunters could use metamorphosis safely. It was a technique reserved for desperate situations, for battles where there was no other choice. To transform was to risk everything, to gamble one's very soul on the outcome of a fight. The Illidari learned all of this and more. They became the most elite warriors in Illidan's service, the most effective hunters of demons in all of existence. They were feared by the Burning Legion, whose soldiers knew that where the Illidari appeared, death followed close behind. As Illidan's army grew, so did the scope of his ambitions. He was no longer content to simply defend Outland from demonic incursions. The defensive posture was necessary while he built his forces, but it would never lead to victory. The Legion was vast beyond comprehension, their resources seemingly infinite. If the demon hunters simply waited for attacks to come, they would eventually be overwhelmed. The answer was obvious. Take the fight to the Legion itself, strike at them on their own territory, make them feel the same fear that they had inflicted upon so many others. The Illidari began to conduct raids on Legion-controlled worlds. Intelligence was gathered through a variety of means: interrogation of captured demons, analysis of magical traces from Legion portals, and the spectral sight of the demon hunters themselves, which could perceive echoes of demonic activity even across vast distances. They would identify a target, usually a world where the demons were massing forces or storing valuable resources, and then they would attack. Small teams of demon hunters, typically 5 to 10 warriors, would portal in through the twisting nether. They would move quickly, striking at key targets, command centers, supply depots, portal generators. They would cause as much destruction as possible, and then portal out before the Legion could mount an effective response. The first raid was against a world called Zoroth, a staging ground where the Legion was gathering forces for an invasion of a nearby system. The demon hunters appeared in the middle of the night, when the demons least expected an attack. They killed the commanders, destroyed the supply caches, and collapsed the portal network that would have allowed the invasion to proceed. By the time the Legion realized what was happening, the demon hunters were gone. These raids were incredibly effective. The demon hunters' abilities made them perfectly suited for guerrilla warfare, for striking quickly and disappearing before the enemy could react. Their spectral sight allowed them to see through demonic illusions and detect ambushes before they were sprung. Their metamorphosis gave them the power to break through any defensive formation. Their combat skills, honed through endless training, made them more than a match for any demon they encountered. The raids continued, each one more daring than the last. The demon hunters struck at Forge Worlds, where the Legion crafted their weapons and armor. They attacked prison camps, where the demons held captives from conquered civilizations, sometimes freeing the prisoners, sometimes simply denying them to the Legion. They hit communication relays that allowed the Legion to coordinate their forces across multiple worlds. Each raid was a wound in the Legion's side. Individually, none of them threatened the overall demonic war machine, but together they forced the Legion to divert resources to defense, to assign guards to installations that had never needed protection before, to slow their conquest of other worlds while they dealt with this new threat. The Legion began to fear the Illidari, demons who had never known fear, who had conquered worlds beyond counting, now looked over their shoulders when they heard that the demon hunters were near. The name of Illidan Stormrage became a curse among the Legion's soldiers, a name spoken in whispers and dreaded in equal measure. Parents in conquered worlds told their children stories of the demon hunters, the monsters who hunted monsters, the darkness that came for the darkness. But the raids were not enough. Illidan wanted more. He wanted to strike at the heart of the Legion, to do something that would shake their very foundations. And he knew exactly how to do it. Nethreza was a world of nightmares. It was the homeworld of the Nethrezim, the dreadlords who served as some of the Legion's most cunning commanders. The Nethrezim were ancient creatures, beings who had existed since before the Legion itself. They were masters of manipulation, of corruption, of turning civilizations against themselves. When the Legion needed to break a world subtly rather than through brute force, they sent the Dreadlords. Here, the Dreadlords kept their archives, their records, their most precious secrets. Millennia of intelligence, gathered from across the cosmos, was stored in their libraries. Here, they planned their campaigns and coordinated their agents across countless worlds. To destroy Nethreza would be to blind the Legion, to deprive them of their most valuable strategists and their accumulated knowledge. Illidan led his demon hunters to Nethreza in person. This was not a raid, but a full-scale invasion, a direct assault on one of the Legion's most important worlds. The battle was brutal, with demons pouring forth to defend their home, while the Illidari fought to break through their lines. They succeeded. The demon hunters reached the Dreadlord's citadel and breached their archives. They found what Illidan had been searching for, the location of Argus, the original homeworld of the Eridar before Sargeras had corrupted them. Argus was the Legion's base of operations, the world from which they launched their crusade against all existence. To reach Argus would be to strike at the very heart of the enemy. Illidan secured this information and then ordered the retreat. But as his demon hunters fled back through the portal to Outland, Illidan did something unexpected. He collapsed the portal's spellwork and directed all of its energy into Nethreza itself. The world exploded. The destruction was absolute. Nethreza was torn apart, shattered into countless fragments that scattered across the twisting nether. Every demon on its surface perished in the cataclysm, their essences dispersed into the void. It was the single greatest defeat the Burning Legion had suffered in millennia, a blow that would take them eons to recover from. The Illidari had proven themselves. They were not just soldiers or warriors, but weapons of mass destruction, capable of accomplishing feats that no other force in existence could match. Among the demon hunters who served Illidan, there were those whose loyalty never wavered, and those who began to question. The most prominent of the questioners was a night elf named Altruis. Altruis had been one of the first to undergo the transformation into a demon hunter. He had absorbed a demon's essence, had torn out his own eyes, had survived the training that killed so many others. He had fought in countless battles against the Legion, had proven his worth time and time again. His skill with the warglaive was legendary, his tactical mind sharp, his dedication to the cause seemingly unshakable. But as the years passed, Altruis began to see things that troubled him. It started with small things, orders that seemed unnecessarily cruel, prisoners who were tortured for information they clearly did not have, villages of innocents who were sacrificed because they happened to be in the way of a strategic objective. Altruis told himself that these were the costs of war, that the stakes were too high for squeamishness, but the justifications rang hollow, even in his own mind. Illidan's methods were becoming more extreme. The alliance with Kill Jaden, even if it was meant to be temporary, required compromises that Altruis found increasingly difficult to accept. To maintain the pretense of serving the demon lord, Illidan had to occasionally fulfill missions that served the Legion's interests. Worlds were destroyed, populations slaughtered, all in the name of maintaining a cover that Altruis suspected was more convenient than necessary. The fell orc armies that Illidan commanded were created by feeding them demon blood, the same blood that had corrupted the orcs of Draenor in the first place. These orcs were slaves to their addiction, creatures of mindless violence who followed Illidan only because he controlled their supply of blood. They were weapons, nothing more, their souls as corrupted as any demons. The Naga who served Illidan had once served Queen Ashera, who had tried to bring Sargeras into Azeroth during the War of the Ancients. Lady Vashj was cunning and ruthless, a creature of the deep who had no love for surface dwellers or their concerns. She served Illidan because it suited her purposes, and Altruis had no doubt that she would betray him the moment that calculation changed. How, Altruis wondered, could they fight the Legion by using the same tools that the Legion used? How could they claim to be different from demons when they employed demonic methods and allied with demonic forces? If they won the war by becoming monsters, had they truly won anything at all? He began to speak with other demon hunters who shared his concerns. There were more of them than he had expected, warriors who had begun to doubt the path they had chosen. They met in secret, discussed their fears, debated what, if anything, they could do. Illidan sensed Altruis's doubts and summoned him for a confrontation. The Lord of the Illidari had always been able to read his followers, his spectral sight perceiving not just magic, but emotion, intention, loyalty. He had seen the seeds of dissent growing in Altruis's heart, and he would not allow them to spread. The two demon hunters argued, their positions irreconcilable. Illidan believed that any method was acceptable if it led to the Legion's defeat. The enemy was too powerful, too entrenched, and too numerous for half measures. Only by fighting fire with fire could they hope to prevail. Those who questioned his methods were naive, weak, unable to see the bigger picture. Altruis countered that by becoming like the enemy, they were already losing the war. What was the point of defeating the Legion if they became just as corrupt in the process? The ends did not justify the means, not when the means involved embracing the very evil they were supposed to oppose. They were supposed to be demon hunters, not demons themselves. Illidan offered him a choice. He could set aside his doubts, recommit himself to the cause, and continue to serve as one of the Illidari's most valued warriors. Or he could leave, abandon his brothers and sisters, walk away from everything they had built together. There was no middle ground. In the end, Altruis left. He could not remain in Illidan's service, could not continue to participate in actions that violated his principles. He departed Outland and made his way to Nagrand, one of the few regions of the shattered world that had retained some semblance of natural beauty. The floating islands of Nagrand drifted through clear skies, covered in grass and flowers that seemed impossibly vibrant compared to the corrupted wastelands that dominated most of Outland. Here, Altruis found a measure of peace, a place where he could continue his war against the Legion without compromising his principles. There, Altruis continued his personal war against the Legion. He worked alone, targeting demon outposts and disrupting their operations. He recruited adventurers to assist him, using them as his eyes and hands to gather intelligence and strike at the enemy. He was careful about his targets, attacking only when he was certain that innocent lives would not be caught in the crossfire. Other demon hunters who shared his views sought him out over time. A small community formed around him, hunters who had left or been expelled from the Illidari for similar reasons. They called themselves the Sufferers, a reference to the constant pain that their transformations caused them, a reminder that they had given up everything for a cause they still believed in. But he was no longer one of the Illidari. He was a demon hunter without a master, a warrior without an army, a hunter without a pack. His former brothers and sisters viewed him as a traitor, a weakling who had abandoned them when the fight grew difficult. The schism between Altruis and Illidan would have consequences that neither could foresee, consequences that would shape the future of all demon hunters. The Illidari's operations continued without Altruis. The assault on Mardum was perhaps their most ambitious campaign yet. Mardum was the prison world that Sargeras had created, the place where he had once held all the demons he defeated. Though shattered when the Dark Titan founded the Burning Legion, fragments of the world still drifted through the twisting nether, remnants of a prison that had held every demon in existence before Sargeras' fall. And on one of those fragments rested the Sargerite Keystone, an artifact that could open portals to any world in the Legion's domain, including Argus itself. The Keystone was a creation of incredible power. Sargeras had forged it to allow travel between the prison world and the rest of the cosmos, a key that could open any door in the Legion's domain. With it, the Illidari could strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. They could reach Argus itself, the heart of the Burning Legion's power. They could take the war directly to Sargeras' throne. The Keystone was guarded by Brood Queen Tyrande, one of the Legion's most powerful commanders. She was an inquisitor of terrible might, a demon who had tortured countless souls for information and pleasure alike. She had established a fortress on Mardum and surrounded herself with armies of demons, confident that no force could reach her in this forgotten corner of the twisting nether. Her fortress was a thing of nightmares. Towers of black stone rose from the shattered ground, their surfaces carved with runes of pain and binding. Demons patrolled every corridor, their senses attuned to any intruder. Magical wards protected every entrance, designed to alert Tyrande the moment anyone attempted to breach her domain. Illidan sent his demon hunters to prove her wrong. The invasion of Mardum began with infiltration. Small teams of demon hunters slipped through the gaps in Tyrande's defenses, neutralizing sentries and disabling wards. They worked in perfect coordination, their spectral sight allowing them to see each other's positions and time their movements precisely. When the infiltrators had created sufficient openings, the main force attacked. The Illidari struck at multiple points simultaneously, overwhelming the demon defenders before they could mount a coordinated response. Portals opened throughout the shattered landscape, disgorging wave after wave of demon hunters. They fought their way across the broken terrain, their warglaves carving through demons with deadly efficiency. The demons fought back with desperate fury. They knew what was at stake, knew that if the keystone fell into enemy hands, no Legion stronghold would be safe. Felguard formed defensive lines, trying to hold back the Illidari advance. Eridar warlocks hurled spells of devastating power, incinerating demon hunters who strayed too close. Infernals fell from the sky like burning meteors, crashing into the ground and rising to join the battle. But the Illidari were relentless. They had trained for this moment, had prepared for exactly this kind of warfare. They used their mobility to outflank defensive positions, their spectral sight to detect ambushes before they could be sprung. They fought with the fury of beings who had sacrificed everything for this cause, who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. At the center of the assault was Illidan himself, leading from the front as he always did. His power had grown immensely since the War of the Ancients, augmented by Sargeras' gift, Gul'dan's skull, and the countless battles he had fought. He was no longer just a demon hunter, but something approaching a demigod, a being of immense power who could challenge the Legion's greatest champions. Where Illidan went, victory followed. He carved through the Legion's defenders like they were made of paper, his warglaves leaving trails of green fire in their wake. Demons who stood against him died in moments, their bodies consumed by feel energy, their essences scattered to the twisting nether. Even the most powerful of Tyrande's lieutenants could not withstand him. The battle against Tyrande was fierce, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Brood Queen tried to flee when she saw her defenses crumbling, tried to use the keystone to escape to another world. But Illidan was too fast, his spectral sight tracking her through her attempted escape. He caught her before she could complete the portal, and their battle shook the very foundations of her fortress. Tyrande was powerful, one of the most formidable demons in the Legion's hierarchy. She wielded magic that could shatter the mountains and summon horrors from the depths of the nether. Her torture techniques were legendary, her cruelty boundless, her ambition infinite. None of it was enough. The Brood Queen fell before the combined might of the Illidari, and the Sargerate keystone was secured. Illidan held the artifact in his hands, feeling its power, understanding its potential. With this, the war against the Legion could enter a new phase. With this, nowhere in the cosmos would be safe from the Demon Hunters' vengeance. But even as the Demon Hunters celebrated their victory, disaster struck on Outland. While the Illidari were on Mardum, a coalition of forces attacked the Black Temple. The timing was not coincidental. Illidan had committed nearly all of his best warriors to the Mardum assault, leaving the Blacks temple defended only by fell orcs and Naga. His enemies had been watching, waiting for exactly such an opportunity. When he departed with his demon hunters, they struck. The assault was led by a group known as the Shatar, Draenei, and their allies, who had long opposed Illidan's rule over Outland. The Draenei had suffered terribly under Illidan's reign. Many of them had been killed in his campaigns, their villages destroyed, their people scattered. The Shatar had united the survivors, forging them into a fighting force capable of challenging the Lord of Outland himself. They were joined by adventurers from Azeroth, heroes who had come through the dark portal to explore the shattered world. These warriors had heard tales of Illidan's tyranny, of his alliances with demons, of his brutal methods. They saw in him a threat that needed to be eliminated, a monster who would one day turn his power against Azeroth itself if left unchecked. And they were guided by Akama, a broken Draenei who had once served Illidan, but had secretly been plotting against him. Akama had sworn allegiance to Illidan years before, when the demon hunter had first conquered the Black Temple. He had served faithfully, or so it seemed, hiding his hatred behind a mask of loyalty. But all the while, he had been preparing for this moment, gathering information, recruiting allies, waiting for the perfect time to strike. The combined forces crashed against the Black Temple's defenses, like a wave against rock. The fell orcs fought fiercely, driven by their addiction to demon blood and their fear of what would happen if they failed. The Naga defended their positions with spells and tridents, their serpentine bodies writhing through the corridors as they struck at the invaders. But they were outmatched, outmaneuvered, and ultimately overwhelmed. Level by level, chamber by chamber, the Black Temple fell. The attackers pushed deeper into the structure, cutting down defenders, breaching wards, destroying everything in their path. Akama guided them through the temple's labyrinthine passages, showing them secret routes and hidden vulnerabilities that only he knew. Illidan returned from Mardum in the midst of the battle. He had sensed something wrong through his connection to the Black Temple, had felt his defenses crumbling even across the vast distance of the twisting nether. He rushed back, portal opening directly into his sanctum, only to find his fortress already falling. The Lord of the Illidari made his final stand in the temple's inner sanctum, the same chamber where he had first claimed the Black Temple as his own. He fought with all his power, with all the skill and fury that had made him the most feared demon hunter in existence. His warglaives carved through attackers by the dozen. His fell magic incinerated entire squads of warriors. His metamorphosis form towered over the battlefield, a demon of terrifying power and unimaginable wrath. But the forces against him were too numerous, too well coordinated, too determined. For every attacker he killed, 3 more took their place. For every spell he cast, counterspells arose to neutralize it. The adventurers from Azeroth were heroes in their own right, warriors who had faced dragons and gods and emerged victorious. They would not be easily deterred. Mayev's shadow song was there, her hatred for Illidan burning as bright as ever after all these years. She had pursued him from the Barrow Deeps to Outland, had sworn to see him returned to prison or destroyed utterly. Now her moment had come. She led the final assault on his position, her Umbra Crescent slicing through his defenses. Illidan was defeated. His body crashed to the ground, his spectral eyes dimming, his life force fading. The battle was over. The Lord of the Illidari had fallen. His body was claimed by Mayev's shadow song, who had never stopped hunting her former prisoner. She would not allow him a warrior's. Death would not grant him the peace of oblivion. Instead, she transported him to the vault of the wardens, a prison in the Broken Isles where the most dangerous prisoners were held. There, Illidan's corpse would remain, preserved by magic, guarded day and night, ensuring that he could never threaten anyone again. The Illidari who had been on Mardum returned to find their master dead and their stronghold conquered. They arrived through portals expecting victory celebrations, only to find their home in ruins and their enemies waiting for them. The Demon Hunters were exhausted from the battle on Mardum, their resources depleted, their numbers reduced. They could not mount an effective defense. They were rounded up by Mayev's watchers and imprisoned alongside Illidan, sealed away in the vault of the wardens to await an eternity of confinement. Their weapons were taken, their powers suppressed, their bodies locked in cells designed to contain the most dangerous beings in existence. It seemed that the Demon Hunter's story had come to an end. Years passed. The world moved on. The Burning Legion's third invasion of Azeroth began. In the years between Illidan's fall and the Legion's return, Azeroth had faced other threats. The Lich King had risen to full power and been defeated. The dragon aspect Deathwing had shattered the world and been destroyed. The ancient empire of Pandaria had been rediscovered, and old enemies had given way to new alliances. The world had changed, had grown, had faced challenge after challenge, and emerged stronger each time. But none of those challenges compared to what was coming. This time, the demons came in force. They had learned from their previous defeats, had marshaled their armies, had prepared for every contingency. Gul'dan, the orc warlock who had served the Legion in another timeline, had been brought to Azeroth to lead the invasion. He was a cunning creature, possessed of terrible power and absolute loyalty to the Burning Legion. The invasion began on the Broken Shore, a fragment of the ancient supercontinent that had sunk beneath the waves during the Sundering. Here, the Legion had established a beachhead, a staging ground for their assault on all of Azeroth. The forces of the Alliance and Horde united to drive them back, but the battle went catastrophically wrong. Both factions suffered devastating losses. King Varian Wrynn of the Alliance fell in battle, sacrificing himself to allow his forces to retreat. Vol'jin, the war chief of the Horde, was mortally wounded and died shortly after. The greatest heroes of Azeroth were scattered, defeated, demoralized by the scale of the Legion's power. The demons pushed outward from the Broken Shore, their forces spreading across Azeroth like a plague. They struck at cities and villages, at temples and strongholds. They corrupted the land with their fell magic, turned the creatures of nature into twisted abominations, raised the dead to fight against the living. Among their targets was the Vault of the Wardens. The Legion's commanders knew that some of their most dangerous enemies were imprisoned there, demon hunters who had killed countless demons and posed a significant threat. If the Illidari were freed, they could rally resistance against the invasion. They needed to be eliminated before they could become a problem. The Legion sent a significant force to the Vault of the Wardens. Demons poured through portals in the sky, landing on the island prison and beginning their assault. They brought with them corrupted Illidari, demon hunters who had fallen to the whispers of their inner demons and now served the Legion as weapons against their former allies. Maiev Shadowsong and her watchers fought desperately to hold the vault. They had dedicated their existence to keeping the prisoners contained, and they would not abandon that duty easily. But the demons were too numerous, too powerful. One by one, the wardens fell, their ancient order crumbling under the Legion's assault. Maiev faced a terrible choice. She could continue to fight, to die defending a prison that was already falling, or she could do the unthinkable, release the very prisoners she had spent so long containing. The choice was clear, even if she hated it. She freed the demon hunters. The locks on the cells disengaged. The wards that had held the Illidari powerless faded away. The demon hunters felt their strength return, felt the power that had been suppressed flooding back into their bodies. The Illidari emerged from their cells, blinking in the light of the outside world for the first time in years. Their spectral sight adjusted quickly, revealing the chaos that surrounded them. Demons were everywhere, fighting wardens in the corridors, burning cells, killing prisoners who had no power to resist. They found themselves surrounded by demons, the very enemies they had dedicated their lives to destroying. And they did what they had been trained to do. They fought. The battle in the Vault of the Wardens was chaotic and brutal. Demons clashed with demon hunters in the corridors and cells, Fellfire meeting Warglaive in a dance of destruction. The Illidari had been imprisoned for years, but they had not forgotten their training. They cut through the demonic invaders with the same deadly efficiency they had always possessed. Among those freed was Corvus Bloodthorn, a night elf whose family had been destroyed by the Legion. Her story was tragically common among demon hunters. She had been a young woman when the Legion came to her village, had watched her parents and siblings die in Fellfire. She had sworn vengeance, had sought out the Illidari and demanded to be trained, had endured the transformation that killed so many aspirants. She had become a demon hunter to avenge her family, had sacrificed her eyes and her humanity for the chance to kill demons. Now she was free again, and she intended to make the most of her liberation. Corvus fought with a fury that impressed even veteran demon hunters. Her warglaives carved through demon flesh with relentless efficiency. Her spectral sight tracked enemies through the chaos of battle. She led charges against the strongest demonic positions, her hate for the Legion burning like a furnace in her chest. Every demon she killed was a tribute to her fallen family. Also freed were Cain's Sunfury and Altruis the Sufferer, both of whom had been imprisoned with the other demon hunters. Their rivalry had not diminished during their imprisonment. If anything, it had intensified. Cain had remained loyal to Illidan throughout his imprisonment, never doubting that his master's cause was just. He had meditated on Illidan's teachings, had strengthened his will against the demon within him, had prepared himself for the day when he would be free to continue the fight. He was certain that day would come, that Illidan's vision would not die in a prison cell. Now his faith had been rewarded. Altruis had used his time in the vault to reflect on his earlier departure, coming to a partial reconciliation with the choices he had made. He had left the Illidari because he believed they had lost their way, had embraced methods that contradicted their purpose. But the years of imprisonment had given him perspective. Perhaps there was no clean way to fight the Legion. Perhaps compromise was inevitable. Perhaps the choice was not between purity and corruption, but between different kinds of corruption. The demon hunters fought their way out of the vault of the wardens, leaving a trail of demon corpses behind them. They used the confusion to escape before reinforcements could arrive, slipping through the chaos with the skills that Illidan had taught them so long ago. They returned to Mardum. There they found the Fell Hammer, the massive Legion ship that they had captured during their earlier invasion. The ship had remained abandoned since their imprisonment, drifting in the remnants of the prison world. But it was not damaged, not destroyed. It still responded to the Sargerite keystone that one of them carried. The Fell Hammer was a vessel of war, designed by the Legion to transport armies across the cosmos. Its FEL engines could open portals to any world in existence. Its weapons could devastate entire cities. Its command center held navigation data for thousands of worlds that the Legion had conquered or targeted. It was a treasure trove of intelligence and power. The demon hunters claimed it as their own, as they had done before. They activated its systems, brought its engines online, took control of its formidable capabilities. The Fell Hammer would serve the enemies of the Legion now, just as it had once served their masters. The Illidari had a new base of operations. The freed demon hunters faced a choice. One of them would need to lead in Illidan's absence to coordinate their efforts against the Legion and rebuild the Illidari's strength. The two candidates were obvious: Cain Sunfury, who had remained loyal to Illidan throughout everything, and Altruis the Sufferer, who had once left but had returned. The debate between the two was fierce, reflecting the fundamental tension that had always existed within the Illidari. How far should they go in pursuit of their goals? What lines, if any, should never be crossed? Were there limits to acceptable sacrifice, or was everything permissible in the war against the Legion? Cain argued that the Illidari needed strong, decisive leadership. The Legion was more powerful than ever, and there was no time for doubt or hesitation. Illidan's methods had been effective, and the Illidari should continue in his tradition, using whatever means necessary to achieve victory. Questioning orders in the middle of a war was a luxury they could not afford. Unity and determination would see them through. He pointed to their current situation as proof. They had escaped the vault of the wardens. They had reclaimed the Fell Hammer. They were free because they had acted decisively, because they had not hesitated when the opportunity arose. That same decisiveness would win the war against the Legion. Altruis countered that blind loyalty had led them to defeat. They had followed Illidan into the assault on Mardum, and while they fought on the shattered prison world, their master had been killed and their stronghold had fallen. Illidan's methods, whatever their effectiveness, had ultimately failed. The Illidari needed to adapt, to learn from their mistakes, to find a better way forward. Victory over the Legion would mean nothing if they lost themselves in the process. What was the point of defeating demons if they became demons themselves? The Illidari had to remember why they fought, had to hold on to some core of purpose and identity. Otherwise, they were just another army of monsters in a universe full of them. The other demon hunters listened to both arguments, weighing the merits of each position. Both leaders had valid points. Both represented genuine traditions within the Illidari. The choice was not between right and wrong, but between different visions of what the demon hunters should be. The choice fell to one of the demon hunters who had emerged as a leader during the escape from the vault. This individual, known as the Slayer, had demonstrated exceptional skill and courage during their imprisonment and liberation. They had earned the respect of their fellow demon hunters through action, not words. The Slayer would become the second in command of the Illidari and would shape the organization's future direction. Their choice would determine which path the demon hunters would follow in the years to come. Some chose Cain, believing that his unwavering commitment to Illidan's vision was what the Illidari needed. They trusted that he would lead them to victory, that his strength and certainty would carry them through the challenges ahead. Others chose Altruis, believing that his willingness to question and adapt made him a better leader for uncertain times. They valued his independence, his commitment to principles that transcended even loyalty to Illidan himself. Regardless of the choice, the Illidari united behind their new leadership and prepared for war. The debate between Cain and Altruis would continue in smaller ways, philosophical discussions and tactical disagreements that reflected the ongoing tension within the order. But when it came time to fight, the demon hunters stood together. The demon hunters joined the broader conflict against the Legion. They fought alongside the other heroes of Azeroth, the warriors and mages and priests who had answered the call to defend their world. It was strange for many of them, this integration with the forces they had once stood apart from. But the Illidari recognized that the Legion's invasion was too vast for any single force to handle alone. The Illidari remained distinct, their methods and abilities setting them apart from the other defenders. Other warriors respected their combat prowess, but were often unsettled by their appearance, by the horns and hooves and burning eyelessness that marked them as something other than mortal. Priests and paladins of the light were particularly wary, sensing the demonic corruption that saturated every demon hunter's being. But in battle, such concerns faded. The demon hunters fought with a ferocity that inspired their allies and terrified their enemies. They led charges into the thickest demonic concentrations, their warglaves harvesting demon souls with every swing. They held positions that would have broken other units, their experience and training allowing them to fight for hours without rest. The demon hunters pursued their own objectives as well. They sought out the artifacts that Kil'jaeden had, created powerful weapons that had fallen into the hands of Legion-corrupted Illidari. These weapons represented both a threat and an opportunity. If left in enemy hands, they could be used against the defenders of Azeroth, but if recovered, they could tip the balance of the war. The twin blades of the Deceiver were perhaps the most dangerous of these artifacts. These warglaives had been forged by Kil'jaeden himself, imbued with his cunning and his malice. They were recovered from Viredis Felsoul, once a respected demon hunter who had succumbed to demonic corruption and now served the Legion. The battle against Viredis was bitter, brother against brother, in a conflict that symbolized everything the Illidari had sacrificed. The Eldrachi Warblades told a different story. The Eldrachi had been a race of warrior champions, perhaps the greatest fighters the universe had ever produced. When Sargeras came to their world, they had refused to bow. They had fought the Dark Titan himself, the only mortal race ever to directly challenge the leader of the Burning Legion. They had lost, of course. No mortal could truly defeat a Titan, but they had earned Sargeras' respect, and when they fell, he had preserved their warblades as trophies. These blades were claimed from Caria Felsoul, another corrupted Illidari who had pledged herself to the Legion. To wield the Eldrachi warblades was to carry the legacy of heroes who had defied the greatest evil in existence. It was a fitting weapon for a demon hunter. These weapons became the signature armaments of the Illidari's leaders, symbols of their commitment to the war against the Legion and their willingness to use the enemy's own power against them. Throughout the conflict, the demon hunters proved their value again and again. Their spectral sight allowed them to detect demonic infiltrators who had evaded other defenses. On multiple occasions, the Illidari identified Legion agents who had disguised themselves as mortals who had infiltrated key positions in the Alliance and Horde militaries. Without the demon hunters, these agents might have sabotaged the war effort from within. Their combat skills made them invaluable on the front lines, capable of holding positions that would have overwhelmed lesser warriors. Their knowledge of the Legion's tactics and vulnerabilities informed strategy and planning at the highest levels. The commanders of the Alliance and Horde learned to value the Illidari's counsel, even if they never fully trusted the beings who gave it. But the true purpose of the Illidari remained unfulfilled. Illidan was still dead, his soul separated from his body, his leadership absent from the organization he had founded. The demon hunters fought well without him, but they knew they were incomplete. Their master was gone, and no amount of military success could fill the void he had left. That was about to change. The demon hunter's resurrection began not with his body, but with his soul. When Illidan died in the Black Temple, his spirit did not move on to whatever afterlife awaited night elves. Instead, it was captured by Helya, the ruler of Helheim, the realm of the dishonored dead. Helya was an ancient being, once a servant of the Titan keeper Odin, but long since corrupted and twisted into something terrible. She ruled over a realm of eternal suffering, collecting souls that she believed had been denied her. Illidan's soul was a prize unlike any other. Here was the most powerful demon hunter ever to exist, a being who had defied gods and titans, who had wielded power that could shape the fate of worlds. Helya would not simply add him to her collection. She had plans for him. She held his soul in captivity, intending to trade it to Gul'dan, who needed it for his own plans. The Orc warlock had discovered that the Legion had a use for Illidan's body, that it could serve as a vessel for Sargeras himself. If the Dark Titan's spirit could be placed within Illidan's powerful form, he could walk upon Azeroth in the flesh, could bring his full power to bear against the world that had resisted him for so long. Gul'dan was serving the Legion in this timeline, having been brought to Azeroth from an alternate Draenor. He had seen his own death in the original timeline, had learned from the mistakes of his other self. He was more cunning now, more cautious, more determined to succeed where his counterpart had failed. He needed Illidan's body as a vessel for Sargeras, a way to bring the Dark Titan into the physical world. But the body without the soul was useless. He needed both. The heroes of Azeroth learned of this plan through intelligence gathered by the Illidari and their allies. They understood the stakes. If Sargeras possessed Illidan's body, the world would fall. Nothing could stand against a being of such power, walking in the flesh, wielding all the might of the Burning Legion. They fought to prevent this. Strike Force assaulted Helheim, fighting through the realm of the dishonored dead, facing Helya's servants and the tormented souls she commanded. The battle was horrific, the dangers unlike anything the heroes had faced before, but they succeeded. They recovered Illidan's soul from Helya's grasp, stealing it away before it could be delivered to Gul'dan. But Gul'dan still had Illidan's body. He had brought it to the Nighthold, the seat of power of the Nightborn elves who had been corrupted by the Legion. The Nightborn were an ancient people, descendants of the Night Elves, who had survived the Sundering by sealing themselves within the city of Suramar. For 10,000 years, they had existed in isolation, their society sustained by the power of the Nightwell, a font of arcane energy created from a portion of the original Well of Eternity. When the Legion returned, the Nightborn had been forced to choose between resistance and submission. Their leader, Grand Magistrix Elisande, had chosen submission, believing that the Legion's victory was inevitable. She had allowed the demons to use Suramar as a staging ground for their invasion, had supported Gul'dan's plans, had betrayed everything her people had once stood for. The heroes of Azeroth pursued Gul'dan to the Nighthold, fighting through armies of Nightborn and demons alike. They battled Elisande herself, breaking through her temporal magic, defeating her forces one by one. And finally, they reached the pinnacle of the Nighthold, where Gul'dan waited with Illidan's body. There, in the climax of a desperate battle, they restored Illidan's soul to his body. The ritual was dangerous, the energies involved beyond the understanding of most mortals. Illidan's soul had been corrupted by its time in Helheim, twisted by Helya's torments. There was no guarantee that the being who awakened would be the same demon hunter who had fallen in the Black Temple. But there was no choice. The world needed Illidan. The demon hunters needed their leader. And so the ritual was performed, the soul returned to the body, and the Lord of the Illidari opened his spectral eyes once more. Illidan awoke. For a moment he was disoriented, uncertain of where he was or what had happened. Memories flooded back. The battle in the Black Temple, his defeat at the hands of the adventurers, the darkness that had claimed him. He had been dead. He was no longer. His first act was to kill Gul'dan. The Orc Warlock had been instrumental in so many of the horrors that had befallen Azeroth and Draenor, had served the Legion with unwavering dedication, had been one of their most effective agents. He had orchestrated the corruption of the orcs, had opened the dark portal that allowed the Horde to invade Azeroth, had served as the right hand of destruction for decades. Illidan destroyed him utterly, ripping him apart with foul energy until nothing remained but his skull, which Illidan crushed in his hand. Warlock's death cry echoed through the Nighthold, a sound of pure agony that was cut short as the life left his body. The Lord of the Illidari had returned. Illidan's resurrection changed the nature of the war. The demon hunters now had their leader back, the being who had founded their order and given them purpose. His tactical genius and immense power could be brought to bear against the Legion once more. But Illidan was not content to simply fight a defensive war. He had always believed in taking the fight to the enemy, in striking at the heart of the Legion, rather than simply defending against their attacks. And now he had the means to do exactly that. The Sargerite Keystone, the artifact that his demon hunters had recovered from Mardum, could open a portal to any world in the Legion's domain, including Argus, the Eridar homeworlds, the seat of the Burning Legion's power. At Kil'jaeden's defeat aboard his command ship, Illidan used the Keystone. He opened a rift in the sky above Azeroth, a massive portal that connected the two worlds. For the first time in history, Azeroth and Argus were linked, the distance between them bridged by Illidan's power. The Legion could no longer hide. Their homeworld was now within reach of the armies of Azeroth. The war would be taken to them, to the very heart of their power. The assault on Argus was the greatest military operation in the history of Azeroth. Forces from the Alliance and the Horde, from the class orders and the defenders of the world, all came together for this final push against the Legion. Argus itself was a world of nightmares. Once it had been a beautiful planet, home to the Eridar civilization that had produced some of the greatest minds and most powerful mages in the universe. But that was 25,000 years ago, before Sargeras came, before the Eridar were given their terrible choice. Now Argus was a hellscape, its surface covered in demonic structures and fell corruption, its skies burning with green fire, its very air toxic to most mortal creatures. The invading forces established a beachhead on Argus, then began their campaign to reach the seat of the Pantheon, where the Titans themselves had once held council. The fighting was brutal, every step forward purchased with blood and sacrifice. Demons poured from every direction, their numbers seemingly endless, their fury boundless. The demon hunters were at the forefront of the assault. Their abilities made them perfectly suited for the fell, corrupted landscape of Argus, their spectral sight allowing them to navigate the twisted terrain and detect demonic ambushes. Their experience fighting the Legion was invaluable, their knowledge of demon tactics and weaknesses, saving countless lives. They led strike teams into demon strongholds, cutting through defenses that would have stopped conventional forces. They gathered intelligence about enemy positions, using their infiltration skills to slip behind enemy lines and return with vital information. They fought in the heaviest combat, their warglaives carving through demons even as fell fire rained down around them. The Illidari suffered casualties, of course. No battle against the Legion came without cost. Demon hunters fell, their bodies consumed by the enemy they had sworn to destroy. But for every hunter who fell, dozens of demons died. The Illidari proved themselves to be exactly what Illidan had intended them to be, the most effective weapon against the Burning Legion that had ever existed. Illidan himself was everywhere during the campaign. He fought alongside his demon hunters, led charges against demon fortifications, and provided strategic guidance to the overall war effort. His power had grown even greater since his resurrection, his understanding of the Legion's weaknesses more complete than ever before. He faced the greatest champions of the Legion and defeated them. He matched power against power, determination against determination, and emerged victorious. He was a symbol of defiance, proof that the Legion could be opposed and defeated. Where Illidan went, hope followed. But Illidan's role in the final battle was different from what anyone expected. The Army of the Light, a coalition of warriors who had been fighting the Legion across the cosmos for generations, joined the assault on Argus. Among them was a being of pure light named Zera, the last surviving prime Naru. Zera believed that Illidan was destined to become the champion of the light, to embrace its power and become the ultimate weapon against the darkness. She attempted to force this destiny upon him. Using her power, she tried to purify Illidan, to burn away the demonic essence that had become part of his being, to transform him into the being she believed he should be. Illidan refused. He destroyed Zera, shattering her crystalline form with a blast of fell energy. He would not be controlled. He would not have his destiny dictated to him. He had made his choices, had paid for them with his eyes and his freedom and his very soul. He would not surrender them now, not even to the light itself. This act shocked many of those who witnessed it. Zera had been revered by the Army of the Light, worshipped as a being of supreme wisdom and power. That Illidan would destroy her seemed like madness, like betrayal of everything they were fighting for. But Illidan had never been one to bow to authority. His entire existence had been defined by his refusal to accept the judgments of others, his determination to forge his own path regardless of the cost. He would fight the Legion, but he would do it his way. The final battle took place in the seat of the Pantheon, the prison where the Titans had bound Sargeras after the Legion's defeat. This was the heart of the cosmic order, a realm that existed outside normal time and space, where beings of unimaginable power had once gathered to shape the universe. Argus the Unmaker awaited them there. The corrupted world soul of Argus itself had been twisted into a weapon by the Legion. Where it should have grown into a new Titan, a being of order and creation, Sargeras had transformed it into something terrible. Argus the Unmaker was death incarnate, a being whose very presence could unmake reality, whose power exceeded anything the heroes had ever faced. The battle against Argus was the most difficult any of them had ever fought. The world soul struck with power that could annihilate armies, with magic that could rewrite the very fabric of existence. Heroes fell, their lives snuffed out in an instant, but others rose to take their place, the combined might of Azeroth's greatest champions refusing to yield. The Titans themselves lent their power to the battle. Ionar, the Lifebinder, Norgannon, the Dreamweaver, Agramar, the Avenger, Golganath, the Thunderer, Khazgoroth, the Shaper, and Aman'Thul, the Highfather, greatest of the Titans, who had slumbered for eons but now awakened to face the corrupted shadow of what should have been their brother. Together, the heroes of Azeroth and the power of the Pantheon overwhelmed Argus the Unmaker. The corrupted world soul fell, its power shattered, its threat ended. For a moment, there was silence in the seat of the Pantheon, a pause in which it seemed that victory had been achieved. Then Sargeras came. The Dark Titan had been watching from beyond the veil of reality, waiting for this moment. He manifested in the seat of the Pantheon, his form so vast that he dwarfed worlds, his power radiating outward like the light of a malevolent sun. He looked upon the heroes who had defeated his legion, upon the titans who had once been his brothers, and his rage was beyond comprehension. The Dark Titan struck at Azeroth from across the cosmos, driving his sword into the planet's surface in a final act of spite. The blade was larger than mountains, forged from the darkest materials in existence, enchanted with power enough to crack worlds. It plunged through the atmosphere, through the crust, deep into the planet itself, creating a wound that began to bleed fire and corruption. The wound he inflicted would have consequences for years to come, leaking corruption and causing devastation across the world. The land around the impact site, in the region known as Silithus, was transformed utterly. The very air became toxic, the ground unstable, the environment hostile to all life. But Sargeras was not triumphant. The Titans, awakened and empowered by the defeat of Argus, combined their power to bind the Dark Titan. Chains of cosmic light wrapped around his form, pulling him back from the mortal world. He struggled against them, his power shaking the foundations of reality, but the combined might of the Pantheon was too great. They pulled him away from Azeroth, drawing him back to the seat of the Pantheon, where he would be imprisoned for eternity. But even as the chains tightened, even as his defeat became certain, Sargeras raged against his fate. He would never stop fighting, never stop trying to escape, never stop seeking the destruction of all creation. Someone had to serve as his jailer. Illidan volunteered. The demon hunters and heroes of Azeroth watched in shock as Illidan stepped forward. He approached the bound form of Sargeras, his spectral sight fixed upon the being who had given him his power 10,000 years before, the being who had started him on this path, the being he had been fighting against his entire existence. He understood that Sargeras could not simply be left alone. The Dark Titan was too powerful, too cunning, too determined. He would find a way to escape any prison, would eventually break free and resume his crusade of destruction, unless someone was there to watch him, to guard him, to ensure that he never escaped. Illidan would be that guardian. He would remain at the seat of the Pantheon, facing Sargeras for eternity, ensuring that the Dark Titan never again threatened the universe. It was the ultimate sacrifice, the final expression of everything Illidan had believed and fought for. The demon hunters tried to stop him, tried to convince him to find another way. But Illidan's mind was made up. He had spent his entire existence fighting the Legion, sacrificing everything for the cause. This was the final sacrifice, the one that would ensure all the others had meaning. He left a message for Tyrande, the woman he had loved for 10,000 years. He acknowledged that their paths had diverged, that she had chosen Malfurion, and he had accepted that choice. But he wanted her to know that everything he had done, every sacrifice he had made, had been in service of protecting the world and the people he loved. He told her that he would always watch over Azeroth, even from the seat of the Pantheon. He would be the eternal guardian, the sentinel who never slept, the watcher who never looked away. As long as he stood, Sargeras would remain bound. Illidan faced Sargeras, warglaves in hand, and prepared for an eternity of vigilance. The Burning Legion was defeated. The war that had threatened to consume all of existence was finally over, and the demon hunters, the Illidari had played a crucial role in that victory. With Illidan gone and the Legion defeated, the Illidari faced an uncertain future. Their purpose had always been the destruction of the Burning Legion. That purpose was now fulfilled. Sargeras was imprisoned, his armies scattered, his crusade of annihilation brought to an end. The great enemy that had united them, that had given meaning to their sacrifices, was no longer a threat. What role was there for demon hunters in a world without the Legion to hunt? The question hung over the Illidari like a storm cloud. Some argued that they should disband, that their time was over. They had sacrificed so much to become demon hunters, had given up their eyes and their humanity and their very souls. They had consumed demon hearts and endured demonic corruption and fought in battles that would have broken lesser beings. Now that sacrifice was complete, its purpose fulfilled. They could try to return to normal lives, to find peace after so many years of war. But what peace could there be for beings like them? They were no longer truly elves, not night elves or blood elves or any other kind. They were something different, something that made others uncomfortable, something that could never truly belong to normal society. Their spectral sight showed them things that normal eyes could not perceive. The demons bound within them still whispered, still tempted, still sought to corrupt. Even in peace, they would never truly be at rest. Others pointed out that the Legion's defeat did not mean the end of all demons. Countless demonic beings still existed in the twisting nether, still sought to corrupt and destroy, still posed threats to Azeroth and other worlds. The Legion had been an organization, a unifying force that directed demonic power toward specific goals. With that organization destroyed, the demons were scattered but not eliminated. Rogue demons wandered the cosmos, seeking worlds to corrupt. Former Legion commanders who had survived the war plotted revenge. Demonic cults still operated on Azeroth, summoning their masters and spreading corruption. The threat was diminished, certainly, but it was not gone. There would always be demons to hunt, always be corruption to fight, always be darkness to oppose. And then there were the threats that had nothing to do with demons at all. The wound that Sargeras had inflicted on Azeroth continued to bleed corruption. Old gods stirred in their prisons beneath the world. The forces of death and shadow gathered strength in realms beyond mortal understanding. Azeroth faced challenges that might prove even more terrible than the Burning Legion. The Demon Hunters' skills could prove valuable against these new threats. Their spectral sight could detect corruption of any kind, not just demonic. Their combat abilities made them formidable warriors against any enemy. Their willingness to make hard choices, to do what others would not, could prove essential in the conflicts to come. The Illidari chose to continue their work. They would hunt the remaining demons, track down those who had escaped the Legion's fall, ensure that the victory they had won was not squandered. They would remain vigilant, remain prepared, remain the guardians they had always been. But they would also adapt. Their focus would expand beyond demons to include any threat to Azeroth and its people. They would work alongside other defenders of the world, sharing their knowledge and skills. They would remain separate in some ways, their nature demanding it, but they would no longer be isolated. Under the leadership of the Slayer and their chosen second-in-command, the Illidari maintained the Fellhammer as their base of operations. The massive ship, captured during the invasion of Mardum, remained a symbol of their accomplishments and a testament to their power. From this base, they coordinated their ongoing operations, dispatched teams to deal with demonic threats, and maintained their vigil over the world that still needed them. They continued to train new demon hunters, to pass on their techniques and their knowledge to the next generation. The process remained as dangerous as ever, the transformation still killing many who attempted it. But those who survived emerged as powerful as any of their predecessors, ready to take up the fight that their order had waged for so long. The sacrifice that they had made would not be forgotten. Every demon hunter knew the price of their power, understood what they had given up to become what they were. They honored that sacrifice by continuing the work, by using the power they had gained to protect those who could not protect themselves. Demon hunters like Marius Felbane and his partner Ted Shoemaker continued to pursue demons across Azeroth. These two made an unlikely pair, the serious demon hunter and the eccentric warlock, but their partnership proved remarkably effective. During the Fourth War and beyond, they tracked down demonic creatures that had escaped justice, ensuring that the Legion's remnants could not rebuild their forces. Their adventures took them across the world and beyond. They investigated demonic incursions in the Broken Isles, tracked rogue Eridar through the wastes of Argus, and even ventured into the Shadowlands when the veil between life and death was torn asunder. Wherever demons might hide, wherever fell corruption might spread, Marius and Ted would eventually appear to deal with the threat. Other demon hunters took similar paths, forming their own teams and pursuing their own missions. Some worked alone, preferring the solitude that their nature often demanded. Others joined with adventurers from different backgrounds, lending their unique abilities to groups that faced a wide variety of threats. The Illidari spread across Azeroth and beyond, a network of hunters who could respond to demonic threats wherever they might appear. The expansion of the demon hunter ranks continued as well. While night elves and blood elves remained the primary races who underwent the transformation, the possibility of other races joining their ranks was explored. The Illidari recognized that demons were a threat to all peoples, not just the children of the Kaldore, and that warriors from any race might prove capable of undergoing the transformation. The criteria remained strict. Aspirants still needed to demonstrate the physical and mental fortitude to survive the ritual. They still needed to possess the willpower to resist the demon bound within them. They still needed to accept that they were sacrificing their former lives for a new purpose. But race alone would no longer be a barrier to those who wished to serve. New techniques were developed as well, adaptations to the original training that reflected the changing nature of the threats the Illidari faced. A new specialization, alchemical augmentation, was developed to allow demon hunters to fight at range, using alchemical weapons and techniques to destroy their enemies from a distance. This represented an evolution in demon hunter tactics, an adaptation to new circumstances and challenges. The alchemical specialists learned to brew potions and concoctions that enhanced their abilities, that could be hurled at enemies to devastating effect, that allowed them to support their allies from a distance. They studied the nature of fell corruption at a chemical level, learning how to neutralize it, how to use it, how to turn the Legion's own tools against any who followed in the demon's footsteps. But at the heart of the Illidari, the fundamental truth remained unchanged. Demon hunters were warriors who had sacrificed everything to protect the world from demonic corruption. They had given up their eyes for spectral sight, had consumed the hearts of demons to gain power, had endured the constant whispers of the entities bound within them. They were monsters who fought monsters, darkness that opposed darkness, the weapon forged to destroy the very evil from which it was made. The story of the Demon Hunters is a story of sacrifice. Consider what it means to become a demon hunter. Consider what it requires, what it costs, what it transforms you into. You begin as an elf, whether born to the ancient night elves or the blood elves who broke away from their Kaldari ancestors. You have a life, a history, a place in the world. You have family, perhaps friends, perhaps loves. You have eyes that see the world in color, that appreciate beauty, that recognize the faces of those you care about. Then you choose to give it all up. You capture a demon, a being of pure malevolence, a creature whose very nature is corruption and destruction. You kill it, feel its life fade under your hands, and then you consume its heart, take its essence into yourself, make the thing that would destroy you into a part of your own being. The demon does not die easily, even then. Its spirit remains within you, whispering, tempting, threatening. It will never stop trying to corrupt you, never stop seeking a moment of weakness through which it can take control. You will carry this burden for the rest of your existence. You blind yourself, destroying your eyes in agony beyond description. You do this voluntarily, accepting that you will never again see the world as others see it. In exchange, you gain spectral sight, the ability to perceive magic and corruption, to see truths hidden from normal vision. But the world will never look the same to you again. Your body changes. Horns may grow from your head. Your skin may darken. You may develop the ability to grow wings, to transform into something that resembles the very demons you hunt. You become something other than what you were, something that makes others uncomfortable, something that can never truly belong to normal society again. And you do all of this willingly. You choose this path, knowing what it will cost, because you have decided that the fight against demons is more important than your own comfort, your own happiness, your own soul. Illidan Stormrage made this choice before anyone else. He sacrificed his eyes to Sargeras, gaining spectral sight but losing the ability to see the world as others saw it. He sacrificed his freedom, spending 10,000 years in prison for crimes that he believed were necessary. He sacrificed his place among his people, becoming an exile and an outcast, the betrayer whose name was spoken with hatred and fear. And in the end, he sacrificed his very existence, choosing to become Sargeras' jailer for eternity. He stands now at the seat of the Pantheon, facing the being who corrupted him, watching for any sign of escape, ready to fight for all time if necessary. He will never return to Azeroth, never see Tyrande again, never walk beneath the stars of his homeland. He has given up everything. Every demon hunter who followed in his footsteps made similar sacrifices. They gave up their eyes, their connection to the natural world, their ability to exist normally among their own people. They absorbed demons into themselves, accepting the constant threat of corruption in exchange for the power to fight back. They became what they hunted. They embraced darkness to fight darkness. They sacrificed their humanity to save humanity. Was it worth it? The answer depends on who you ask. To those who see only the methods, the fell corruption, and the demonic power, the demon hunters are monsters, barely distinguishable from the enemies they fight. They are creatures of darkness, beings who have willingly accepted demonic corruption, warriors who use evil to fight evil. How can they be trusted? How can they be heroes? To those who see the results, the perspective is very different. The defeat of the Burning Legion, the salvation of countless worlds, the protection of innocent lives beyond counting. These are the accomplishments of the Demon Hunters. Without them, the war against the Legion might have been lost. Without their sacrifices, Azeroth might have burned like so many worlds before it. Perhaps both perspectives are correct. Perhaps the Demon Hunters are both monsters and heroes, both darkness and light. They occupy a space between extremes, embodying the terrible truth that sometimes the only way to fight evil is to embrace a portion of it yourself. The Illidari stand as a reminder that sacrifice can take many forms. Sometimes we sacrifice our comfort, our safety, our happiness. Sometimes we sacrifice our very selves, becoming something new and strange in order to accomplish what must be done. There is a certain nobility in that kind of sacrifice, even if it is a dark nobility. The Demon Hunters did not become what they are for personal gain or glory. They did not seek power for its own sake. They accepted corruption because they believed it was the only way to fight corruption. They became monsters because the monsters they faced were too powerful to be fought any other way. This does not make their methods any less terrible. The Demon Hunters have done things that would horrify most people. They have used prisoners as fuel for their experiments. They have allied with beings of questionable morality. They have employed tactics that blur the line between hunter and hunted. Their history is stained with blood and shadow, but it is also illuminated by purpose. Every dark deed was done in service of a brighter goal. Every sacrifice was made so that others would not have to make the same sacrifice. Every compromise was accepted because the alternative was the destruction of everything. The Demon Hunters chose the latter path. They looked upon the horrors that the Burning Legion inflicted upon the universe, and they decided that no price was too high to pay to stop them. They consumed demon hearts and tore out their own eyes and bound themselves to entities of pure malevolence, all in service of a cause greater than themselves. In doing so, they became the Illidari. They became the disciples of Illidan Stormrage, the first and greatest demon hunter. They became the bane of demonkind, the nemesis of the Legion, the warriors who would not stop until every demon in existence had been destroyed. They became heroes. Not the kind of heroes who are celebrated in songs and stories, perhaps. Their methods are too dark, their powers too disturbing, their appearance too monstrous. Children do not dress up as demon hunters for festival celebrations. Bards do not sing of their noble deeds in the halls of kings. They are the shadows that fight shadows, the darkness that guards against darkness, the monsters that stand between innocence and annihilation. But heroes nonetheless, beings who sacrificed everything to protect a world that often feared and despised them. They have never asked for thanks, never expected gratitude, never demanded recognition. They do what they do because it needs to be done, because someone must stand against the darkness, because they have already given too much to stop now. That is the legacy of the Demon Hunters. That is what they gave and what they became. The future remains uncertain. New threats arise to challenge Azeroth, threats that may prove as terrible as the Burning Legion. The Demon Hunters will be there to face them, their warglaives sharp, their spectral sight piercing the shadows. They will continue to make the sacrifices that others cannot, or will not make. They will continue to walk the path between darkness and light. And somewhere, at the seat of the Pantheon, Illidan Stormrage stands eternal guard over the Dark Titan who began it all. His warglaives are ready, his spectral sight ever watchful, his determination unbroken by the endless march of time. He does not grow weary, does not falter, does not doubt. He has accepted his role, has embraced his eternal purpose. He watches Sargeras with the same intensity that he brought to every battle, every sacrifice, every moment of his long existence. The Dark Titan tests his bonds, seeks weaknesses, plots escape. Illidan is ready for him. They will face each other for eternity, the betrayer and the fallen champion, the demon hunter and the Dark Titan. Neither will yield, neither will break. And as long as Illidan stands, Azeroth and all the other worlds of the universe will remain safe from the being who sought to destroy them all. He is the first demon hunter. He is the betrayer. He is the savior of worlds beyond counting. He is Illidan Stormrage, and he is prepared. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. There is so much more Warcraft lore to explore right here on World of Sleepcraft.